box in 2 weeks.
This is a nice coffee cup.
Sweet. All righty then. Let's see, tonight we have Pastor David Butler.
Yes, we do.
Pastor, come on up and lead us in a invocation. Good to see you. Long time no see, like half a day.
Thank you, Mayor. Would you bow with me, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you for a wonderful evening tonight. We thank you, Lord, for the good people that you have put in place to rule and to govern our city. Father, we just ask your blessings upon each one. We thank you for the beauty that it beholds. We thank you, Lord, for the Gulf, the harbor, the bay. Lord, all that harvest that we are able to get from it. Father, we just thank you for your many blessings. We pray for our neighbors to the south that have suffered with hurricane. We ask for your protection during the remainder time of hurricane season. And we just ask, Lord, that you keep us from all evil, that you would put a hedge of protection about us and our community. We give you the praise, Lord, as we remember the poor and reach out to them to do all that we may be able to do to help sustain them. We give you the praise for this meeting tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, up first is the agenda approval.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion. Second. And a second. Take a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, up first, we have a proclamation this evening, Larry Hatchett Fishing Day. Lights on. City of Destin proclamation of the Larry Hatchett Fishing Day. Whereas in October, more than 100 foster children will get the chance to fish in the 74th Annual Destin Fishing Rodeo as part of the Larry Hatchett Fishing Foundation. And whereas teaching kids to fish is the very heart of the Larry Hatchett Fishing Foundation, and for the last 31 years, the foundation has done just that. And whereas the event has grown, with this year being the 32nd year for the foundation to take kids fishing as part of the rodeo, and whereas for the past 3 decades, the foundation has taken youth out for a day of fishing during the rodeo, Destin's oldest tradition. And whereas the Larry Hatchett Fishing Foundation, a nonprofit, was formed in 1990 after Larry Hatchett, who loved to fish and often took children fishing with him in the Gulf of Mexico, died of a heart attack at the age of 34. And whereas the Larry Hatchett Fishing Foundation was created as a memorial to Larry, who fished all over the world. Larry was from Memphis, Tennessee. His greatest joy, however, was fishing in the Gulf. And whereas Larry called Destin the capital of his soul, he enjoyed teaching how to fish, children how to fish, as well as seeing their elation when they reeled in their first catch. And whereas the 32nd annual trip is scheduled for October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, 2022, and will include children from foster homes in Florida, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And now, therefore, I, Gary Jarvis, Mayor, along with the Destin City Council, do hereby proclaim October 22nd, 2022 as the Larry Hatchett Fishing Day in the city of Destin, and encourage all citizens to be part of this special day, which reminds us how fortunate we are to live in such a unique fishing village. So done this 17th day of October. Larry.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I'm Bob Wilder. This is my daughter, Claudia Wilder. We are very delighted and excited and honored to receive this proclamation. Larry died of a heart attack at age 34 in 1990, as we've spoken. Mayor, thank you very much. City Council, I appreciate that very much. And citizens of Destin. we have, this Thursday, there will be 114 children coming to town, most of which they've never seen the ocean, they've never fished, they've never stayed in beachfront condominiums. This year, these children will go fishing, they will see the ocean, they will stay in beachfront condominiums. We will take the fish that they catch aboard the American Spirit. They'll be cooked for dinner, and they'll eat the fish they caught for dinner. So it's a complete roundabout. I've got 3 children, all of which are officers of our nonprofit. So for me, when I'm dead and gone and fishing in heaven, they will take over. This will last for a lifetime. I've been here doing this for 32 years. They'll do this for 34, 5, 8, 40, 60 years. And this will be a continuation. We've only not been able to fish twice in our time. First time was in 1995 when Opal hit. I didn't even come down here, but we did take the money that we used in our budget for our fishing foundation, and we helped rebuild the Welcome to Destin sign on the west side of town. And they actually had, if anybody's got a photo, I'd love to have one. It actually said at the bottom, thanks to the Larry Hatchett Fishing Foundation, at the bottom of the sign. So I'll be here next year. They'll be here next year. Y'all be here next year. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Kids. Yeah, it's going to be a little breezy in the morning, but
They don't know about that.
all righty then. We got that out of the way. Up next is public comments. I'll start over here at this side of the room. You have 3 minutes. At about 2:45, I'll ask you politely to wind up your thoughts. And I want to remind everyone that not only do you have an opportunity to make public comment now, but at the very end of the meeting, there'll be another opportunity to comment on the things that we have done or what's been said. So if you have a lot of patience, you can stick around for your second opportunity to speak. So with that being said, I'm going to open up public comment period. I'll start over here on this side of the room. If anyone wants to come on up now, and then I'll work my way over here to my right.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. You know when I show up, I have something to say. I apologize, my shirt is very wrinkled. I don't even have my glasses, and you're all blurry, so I hope I make it home safely tonight. So I want to talk to you about code compliance. I don't know what else to tell you. How many hundreds of emails have I written this summer? It's real easy, but there's only one problem. Now I don't even know what I'm doing. I've tried to contact code compliance this way. I've tried to contact code compliance that way. I've engaged you guys. I've spoken to you guys. And I'm really only concentrating on garbage cans, non-registered short-term rentals, and maybe parking. It is a nightmare. I spoke to code compliance director last week by phone because finally I said maybe I should just call her. And I did. I was not happy with the conversation that I had with her. Not at all. You have a cancer in that department, and I suggest that you guys figure it out, because the code compliance department of this city is what we do deal with. It's what makes our quality of life. when I'm told by your code compliance director that she's afraid that somebody's going to come slash my tires, kill my dog, or set my house on fire, your code compliance director, who's not doing their job, is indirectly threatening me, the citizen, who's the complainant, because by Florida state statute, you have to have a name for a complainant on that complaint, and I stick my neck out there to make sure that we have a clean city. I do not appreciate the things that were said to me on the phone by her, on any level whatsoever. I don't point fingers at anybody. She walked into a mess. It needs to be fixed. If she can fix it, let's get it done. But I do not want to be threatened by the code compliance director again. Thank you.
Up next, anyone over here? Come on up. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't need permission. You don't need permission. Just come on up.
I thought you need permission for everything.
No,
Oh.
not
I'm
with me,
sorry.
sir, as you well know.
Yes, sir. One of the reasons that I'm here, well, I have a number
You
of
forgot
reasons.
name and
Oh,
address.
I'm sorry. I
For
know
the public
everybody here,
record, not
but
because
I'm
we
Bill
don't
Reddington,
know.
722 Vintage Circle, Destin, Florida, 22-year resident. Okay?
Got
A couple things that have transpired here within the last few days is over by where I live on Benning, and I know there's probably not much y'all can do about it, but the coyotes are back. Okay, there was a couple of them walking down our street last night. They treed two of the local cats that were out. I called wildlife today, no response yet. Okay, not a surprise there. But I sure wish that y'all could put in a good word somewhere, because at some point those coyotes are going to get some little kid. That's what I'm worried about. Okay? Anyway, that's number one. And we need your help with that, please, if at all possible. Number two, I saw here that we have a cancellation of the purchase of the third property down in Crystal Beach. Okay? I'm not quite sure that I understand. Y'all have become 2/3 of the way through the project. Okay? I mean, you all don't know, but I'm a real estate agent and I kind of drive by there a lot. And the question that I get all the time is, well, when are they going to finish the park down there? Okay? And now, in today's agenda, we're going to repeal purchasing the third property. I mean, I understand possibly the money issue on it, but I would just guess that the owner of that property would be receptive, okay? But more importantly, what's going to happen with the $8 million, wherever it came from, that you spent on the two properties that are on the east and west side of the third property? What are you going to do there? I mean, do I have to buy a golf cart so I can park down there? Because that's the only thing that's parking there is the 8 or 12 golf carts that I saw yesterday and today. Okay? So I'd sure like to know what the plan is for that particular thing. I see here that it was sidetracked because of the Tarpon Beach property. Well, I mean, I don't understand. You know, I sure wish that there was another way other than just canceling that project. I mean, what are y'all going to do with what you got down there is the number one big question. And it's just, you know, I mean, once again, I've been living here for 22 years. I used to go to that beach right there virtually 5 days a week and go walking. Okay? Now, because of the parking issue and the rest of it, I don't really go there. Plus, the world of skin cancer finally caught up to me. And it has me tendency to stay away from there, but the same answer. We paid a lot of money to park golf carts, is the way I see it now. I mean, hopefully there'll be some sort of suggestion beyond all that. And, you know, once again, let's contact the owner and see if we can make a deal there. It would seem to make sense to me. Anyway, thank you.
All right, if you stick around and don't leave, some of your questions will be answered during that portion of the meeting. Okay, all right. Just letting you know. All right, anyone else? Come on up. I forgot to explain it. Name and address for the public record, so not everybody's here that listening online. Go ahead.
Bill McKissick, 151 Calhoun Avenue. And I too have a residence for over 20 years, over 25 years on Calhoun. And I just have a vision of our new Crosstown connection that we're working on, an idea of how I think it could be improved and move even smoother. From seeing that traffic flow on that end of town through all of these years, I'm thinking if Stallman was made a one-way street going south, and then Palmetto was made a one-way street going north that ties into the Crosstown connection, when it comes together, that's always going to be a bottleneck at that end regardless. But if we made those one-way each direction, we could open up 2 lanes or 3 lanes actually on Stallman going out, 2 going west and 1 going east, which would really open up that flow and let that bottleneck get out of there. But it would just take, I mean, we do it in the big cities. I'm from New Orleans, so we have a lot of one-way streets, because the streets are really narrow. So I think it'd be a great idea if we put that in, maybe into the thought process.
Thanks, sir. Up next, anyone? Come on up.
Hey, Todd Burr, 4510 Luke Avenue. And I just wanted to come up as looking through the agenda as you go through today. I know one of the items is capital project management services, and I've talked with a few of you before, but I just wanted to throw a couple thoughts out there, and I'm a concerned citizen to make sure we get it done right. I do think we need some help. I usually stay away from the resume thing, but I am going to say I also come as a level 3 DOD certified project manager. I've got a graduate certificate from the University of Colorado in project management, and I've been a PMP certified project manager, and that's what I did for the last 10 years of my working for the DOD. I only say that to say companies got a good experience, they've got a great proposal, but federal, state, most large municipalities, it would be odd to strike a contract with someone that only has licensed PEs, and there's no certificated project managers anywhere. And when you have certificated project managers required to go to training, you got to have experience, you got to pass an exam, all those things for a criteria. They got great folks on there. I'm an engineer by training, so I love engineers too. PEs are great, but they're not project managers. And if we're going to spend a bunch of money to put something in for project managers, I think you could take the existing agreement and just put in there, hey, and by the way, to lead the project, you need certified project managers before it's done. And I think that would really help. You know, for those who might not understand, it'd kind of like, hey, something that really needs a GC, and you just go get a handyman for it. The guys who do GCs are still, you got great handymen, but they have to do a lot of training, a lot of certification, a lot of, you know, all those things to pass. Just seems if we're going to put this much money into it, we should get the right people with the training and their credentials behind it. Just some thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. Anyone else before I close it for the moment? Seeing no other folks, we will go ahead and close the public comment period at this time. A reminder, you get to do it again at the very end. Make comment on what's been taking place. So, back at it. Next, consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's take a vote. Vote is unanimous, so moved. Lance, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item is our capital project management agreement with Matrix, and we have, I believe Cameron's going to make the presentation for us.
It's good to see some familiar faces. Be back in front of this council. My name is Cameron Bowski. I'm actually here on behalf of Zachary Payne, who you'll shortly see on the slides is listed on the org chart. Unfortunately, he had committed travel for a client today, so asked for me to speak on his behalf. Do we have those slides up? Are they coming up now? Thank you so much. All right, next slide, please. Do you all have the slides in front of you, I presume? Okay, wonderful. So this is the agenda we're going to cover today. We'll talk a little bit about the team that we've assembled to perform this work, and I think I heard Todd will address some of the comments about project management and that certification. We'll go over our interpretation and review of the scope of services as they are described. I think we definitely need to touch upon potential conflict of work that's described, work that we can perform, and work that we specifically won't perform. Some clarity on that front I think is key, and then we'll go over a general review of the MSA itself. Next slide, please. All right, so as I mentioned before, Zachary Payne, my boss, the project manager listed for this initiative. And what I really want to highlight on this slide is everyone that you see in orange here is local. Actually, the bulk of our core team is local. I have a few folks from AvCon here, Calvin, Michael, and then Charmaine, our registered architect on our team, who are all local, just to represent a small portion of that local team. And it's not just that, that's just the core team that we have listed here. I think it's also important to note that between Nova, MoCA, AvCon, Matrix, and GCT combined, we have a reach-back capability of over 500 personnel to ebb and flow and really flex all of our needs and requirements to meet your needs and requirements depending on what projects we have that are last-minute adds or already in the capital management program that we want to manage appropriately. Any questions on staff specifically? Yeah, so before you go to the next slide, one of the things I want to address Todd's comments about project management while we're on the topic of reach-back support. So I myself, I've been a public works director, I've been a construction manager for federal work, I've been a leader of construction managers as well, and I represent just one of the many people of those 500 that I talked about that are part of that reach-back support that can and will support these projects as they come up through the first contract year and hopefully option years. Next slide, please. So review of scope of services. This slide requires a little bit of explanation. So that first column, percent of total, so that's what we think when we're looking at the lion's share of the work, that whole left column adds up to 100%. So we anticipate that over the course of a single contract year and then the years thereafter, the bulk of the work will be that on-site support, will be the actual construction and post-construction services. And that's to be expected. And then if you look at the other two columns in terms of on-site work versus reach back, that shows how that work will be supported specifically. So as you would expect, construction, you can't do it from an armchair. You need to be on site to do that. So construction and post-construction services, it's an 80-20 spread between 80% on-site work and then 20% reach back support. And then you see roughly vice versa for pre-design, design services, and then general program management. Does that make sense? Okay, I won't belabor that too much. Next slide, please. And I've got my timer going, so I don't waste anybody's time here. Conflict avoidance. So, Matrix is a design firm, and under this contract, capital management, obviously design services are required. So there's some potential conflict that's listed and very obvious in the MSA. For example, firm may be allowed to self-perform certain aspects of the design services with prior approval from the city. That's one point that can obviously draw some ire depending on how it's interpreted and how it's applied in our execution of these services. At the end of the day, our expectation is that we will serve as an owner reps for the city. It's a role that I've done for many clients, many cities, municipalities, as well as counties and states. And for this specific effort, if you go to the next slide, we'll describe where we demarcate those specific services and where we draw that line. So I want to focus on the right side. I won't cover every one of these, but it is important that I articulate precisely what we intend not to do. So for those who are familiar with the design and construction process, as it comes to design, what we will not be doing is the 35% to 100% design. So there's pre-design services, there's permitting, there's environmental compliance considerations, there's conceptual and schematic drawings, which we will support. We'll take it up to, we'll say 15% design when it's appropriate and applicable, but then that is then turned over. We will not compete for design services, A&E design services, to go from 35% to issued for construction design drawings. That's out of our lane. However, we hope to help with the bidding process, bid opening, competitive analysis, and make recommendations to the city for general contractors and design firms to perform that type of work. Next, we will not serve as a general contractor overseeing construction. We don't do construction, and we understand that whatever general contractor is awarded this work will need to provide their own oversight for day-to-day activities, for materials, equipment, scheduling, getting all the right people on the site to perform the work. However, we will perform quality assurance for the work that is being performed, making sure that you have a dedicated representative on site to make sure that the construction, as well as the design services, are being performed based on your requirements and your intent. All right, finally, we will not serve as the on-site construction manager. So there has to be a superintendent on behalf of the general contractor and a construction manager, and ideally a safety rep, who are coordinating those day-to-day activities. Once again, however, we will be there to do any administration on behalf of the city, processing of submittals and making sure that your intent is met and that your requirements are met, and specifically the design drawings and specifications and all that that entails. Any questions on that? All right, next. Oh, yeah, I'm actually. Next slide, please. All right, so this one's an easy one. We reviewed the MSA, there really is no showstoppers. I won't list the 4 things you have shown here, but we did recommend 4 changes. We've provided a draft. Your legal team has reviewed it, didn't have any comments. Turn it over to you.
No, they mostly accepted the draft that was provided, which is pretty consistent with the school district's version. They did have some minor clarifications on these 4 articles. I did not have any problem with those.
Thank you, sir. Next slide, please. So last thing to discuss, questions of cost. So with my over a decade of experience doing design and construction work for projects as low as $60,000 to projects as much as $65 million, what I have seen across that decade, and should be no surprise to you, is as the construction cost goes up, the percentage of cost for design always goes down. And this cost proposal reflects that. So for projects, construction projects with a programmed or budgeted amount of less than $500,000, our support would be capped at 8%, and then you'll see we have a graduated rate from $500,000 to $1 million, and then above $1 million. I can describe that another way, unless everybody is good with that. All right. So the last thing to highlight, and I think it's important on this one, we understand that this is, developing a relationship with the city. So there's some language in the contract with respect to capturing kind of value engineering recommendations or the cost savings associated with that, coming back to Matrix. However, for the first contract year, we propose that any savings that we capture from value engineering recommendations or any innovations that we bring to the table as a result of our capital project management, that go completely back to the city as we work through developing a relationship. Particularly that first year, I think is very, very important to have a clear understanding between how we're supporting the city and where those linkages are, and then potentially negotiate having those cost savings shared in the future option years. Next slide. Should be the last one, so I turn it over to you for questions.
All right,
Thank you
Kevin,
once again.
you had a question? I'm sorry, I caught you right in the middle of a drink.
It's all good. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
First question is in regards to Mr. Todd, and you had a response to him, but your response was that you have experience working in projects and things like that. But the specific comment about the licensing and those types of statements that were made, there was not much of a response to that in regards to the staff.
Great question.
I missed it.
No, great comment, and thank you for that. So among all of the team members that I articulated in the broader Matrix team between MOCA, AVCON, GCT, and Matrix and that 500-person reach-back support, that organizational chart shows the core team, but obviously for any contract, we can't show everybody. It just doesn't make sense to show everybody that's going to support that specific contract. Among that team, there are dozens of PMP, project management certified personnel that can be brought to bear to support any one of these efforts. It just doesn't happen to be on this specific.
Out of those
team.
500 people, they have letters next to their name, but they might not even be working on our project, possibly. But they're there to reach to. That's what you're saying.
That is a possibility,
Gotcha.
yes.
Okay. The fee and the pricing, I mean, is this, you listed what you will and will not do. And I know that's a summary probably, the contract's probably a lot more detailed. Is it an a la carte type of, as we want a project, we're going to come to you guys? Or is it for 8% of a project that's less than $500,000, you're doing all of those things throughout the whole project? Is that 8% for everything?
So that 8% is for everything that's articulated in terms of pre-design services, active project management during construction and closeout. So yes, it is all inclusive of that for that specific rate. However, it is important to note, and this is obvious for any program management, is that you may not award some of those projects. You're going to have bid bustings and whatnot, and they're going to blow some of those opportunities out of the water. If that happens, then, we'll work up to a point, support all the due diligence necessary to get us as close as we can to project award. If that falls through, then we cut that back. Obviously, we're not going to be charging 8% if we don't actually award the project, because we're not managing that. And whatever fee we've extended up to that point, we'll press forward, so.
So, I mean, one of my main concerns is, and I'm very appreciative of you making it very clear what you will not perform, is that you will not serve as a general contractor, you will not serve as an on-site manager for the builder and things like that. And one of the issues that we've had in the past 2 years since I've been up here is managing a project.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea and the goal is to hire a project manager. It requires somebody to be overseeing the general contractor, the day-to-day construction, and what the project's going on out there, because we can't do that, I guess.
Right.
So we're trying to hire somebody to do that, but you're not going to do that. So it's worrisome. You know what I mean? Because we can't rely on our general contractor. We can't rely on the guys that we're paying millions and millions of dollars to do a job. So we're trying to find somebody to handle that for us. That's my thought.
And I'm glad you brought that up, and this is an important distinction to make. The reason I articulated in that way, and probably insufficiently, is that we don't in any way want to take away, and I think you hit home on this, the responsibility of the general contractors to still fill that role. And that needs to be articulated, because us stepping in does not exonerate them from taking care of those responsibilities. However, and I think this is well articulated in the proposal or the draft MSA, we are still performing a role like a project manager in terms of day-to-day on-site support, administration, scheduling, budgeting, almost hand in glove, so that we can do the quality assurance that's absolutely necessary for their project management.
You're managing the project, you're just not the GC out there.
Exactly.
But you're managing the GC
Yes.
for the job they're doing.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you. Nope, that's okay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm just, I'm listening and, I was listening and learning. So I have similar concerns that I had last time, okay? Which is kind of what Kevin's was alluding to, is we don't have a project manager. So I go to the contract, because really, the devil's in the details, and I go to Article 2, and it talks about what services, including but not limited to studies, surveys, design, preparation of plans, specifications, contract documents, conducting public information meetings, preparation of cost estimates, assist. So I've done a lot of projects, overseen a lot of projects myself. Now, I'm not certified PMP, but I'm doing a $3 million project right now down at One Seagrove Place, right? I've got an architect, I've got an engineering firm, I've got a civil engineering firm, and they're doing all this. But what I'm doing is bringing everybody into the room, to include the general contractor, and going, you told me it was going to be done on this day, it's not done on this day. I don't need y'all to design, I don't need you to do the plans or meet with the public or hold hearings. I need you to manage the project. That's what we asked for, and that's all we asked for. We didn't, and I know, and like I said, I believe the last time, it may not be in y'all's wheelhouse. Y'all do some amazing work, and we've worked with you on several projects before. In AvCon, we've worked with them before. But I don't need the architects and the engineers and all these other people. I need a project manager. Don't need a GC. We're going to have a GC. Don't need somebody, construction administration, okay? That's what the architects normally get paid to do, or that's what the engineers normally get paid to do, the engineering firm. I use a different one down for this project. So I'm just saying, I still kind of have the same issues that I had before. Y'all have come, the staff, you went back, you improved it, you got better, but y'all are still doing what I consider y'all's basic function that y'all do real well, but it's not showing me the project management side. That's the only thing I would say on this.
Cheryl, do you want to come up and talk about Air Force Enlisted Village a little bit and what you do? You introduce yourself.
I'm Charmaine Roberts, and I've been working with the Air Force Enlisted Village since 2017 on their construction projects. We've did a number of renovations, a small addition to their community center, and a $20 million Village 6 facility that includes 63 apartments and a community center there. And what Matrix did for them was provided, we called it an owner's representative function, where we had the architect and the GC, and we stepped in to coordinate between the Air Force Enlisted Village, the architect, and the general contractor to make sure that everything flowed on, and we were the owner's representative. So we had their interests first. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's more of but what my concern, to be specific, is what if we use one of our other continuing engineering firms, continuing services contract engineering firms? And so are you going to charge us the 8% to do this little piece, the project management, as opposed to everything that's in the scope in Article 2? Because I'm not, and this is just me, I'm just one of seven, but I'm not into the Article 2 scope of services, because 90% of that, I really don't want you doing. And if you don't do it, if your choice is to be a continuing services engineering consultant for the city or being our project manager, which one would you pick?
Great question. And thank you so much for coming up, Charmaine. And thank you, Councilmember, for the question. So I'll say two things. So the reason I brought Charmaine up specifically was because your history with Matrix is our design work, right? And hence the question. And I wanted to be able to show with Charmaine, Matrix has been supporting both locally and with our dedicated construction management team. We have other folks in our Colorado Springs and Denver office. We have teams who just do construction management. That just happens to not be our specific history working with you. So there's a lack of familiarity. The second thing I'll mention is that the answer to your explicit question, if you use one of your continuing services contracts, is that this is going to be, I would say, open kimono negotiation. That's the intent. This first year is really where all of that goodness happens in terms of a full understanding of what you want us to support. All of the language that's articulated in the contract is specifically for that reason. We wanted to leave it as open as possible, so as needed, the city can leverage and lean on some of those capabilities that we have, because we have a keen understanding of those pre-designed services and the impact of failing at that level or at the beginning, what that does to the actual construction in terms of the problems that it creates. So if that's where you want help, if we see some changes in your staffing, if it goes down or up, that's an opportunity for you to lean on us. If not, then we can negotiate a different percentage fee based on what your needs are.
Go ahead, Ms. Tracy.
To speak to what Mr. Schmidt brought up and what Mr. Babby brought up, the continuing part of Article 2 is, and it says, the intent of this RFQ is to acquire a broad range of capital project management services for the city of Destin. So I like Mr. Bagby and Mr. Schmidt, we're not looking for services. We need somebody that's going to stand over the people doing the job and get the job done. You know, your services are great when we use you for other things, but I thought this was going to be we're going to manage and generally contract the people doing the job so that we don't wait 6, 9, 12 months for a park down on the harbor that still isn't done because we don't have a general contractor worth a flip.
Who was controlling slides? Can we go back a couple slides? Because that's a great point, and I've been
Well,
where
I mean,
you said. I know
understand,
exactly what you mean.
and you are speaking eloquently, and you have done a phenomenal job, but what we need and what we want is not what any of this even alludes that you're going to do for us.
One more back, please. So, and that was the purpose of this slide, and I probably didn't spend enough time on it. So what we anticipate, what Matrix really sees happening, if you look at the second and third column, we anticipate that if I go from here to 1 year out, 70% of every hour expended on this contract will be that construction and active construction management on-site work. And and it's an 80-20 split. 80% of the time is actually on-site, day-to-day, watching the construction, talking with the people doing the work. That's how we see that. We see this playing out because we understood that's where the greatest need is at.
Okay.
I know that's what you want, and that's what we hope propose to provide.
I want
But we-
100%. I want you there, on them, right there, watching them so that in 1 month they get it done, not 9
I got
months.
you.
We need some stuff done. We don't need to
I
just,
understand.
you know.
I understand.
We don't want you to handhold somebody.
Yeah.
We want you to sledgehammer them. We're your job, but, we're going to get this done right.
Yeah.
Because we have projects that we need to make sure we have somebody that's got the knowledge and what your system and your company is about.
Yeah.
Taking it to the general contractor, that role. You lead, and then everything trickles down from there.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been working with Michael Burgess developing this capital improvements plan 5 to 20 years out, and I have a keen understanding of the needs of Destin, believe me.
And just remind everyone too that you can't compare every project that we're going to do in the future to the one that we got going on now. We've learned a lot of valuable lessons here.
It's a little too close.
So this whole presentation is not about catch-up. It's about how we're going to handle things in the future. Mr. Braden, you're up next.
Thank you. With that, Mayor, I think the only project that wasn't a disaster that the city's been involved with is the Kelly Street project, the west end, because really the city wasn't involved with that. And I believe the park that we're referring to on the harbor that's been an utter failure is because of the way I believe the contract was presented or prepared. And it comes down to the specs as well, the lack of. Because it doesn't matter how you go out there and manage that job. If it calls for a 8-inch pile and then you want a 10-inch one there, it doesn't matter. It's what you're going to go out there and you're going to make sure, just like you said a while ago, that we get what we want and what we're paying for and what the contract and the plans and the specs call for. You can't make that contractor do anything else.
Right.
Just like the contractor in the park down here. We're trying to make that man do things that's not in the specs. We paid, I don't know, over $250,000 for them plans and specs, and there's really not any. So it comes down to the contract and comes down to the specs. When it goes to court, that's what you got to have. And then, I mean, and as a city, we need our bid committee. We don't need janitors and landscapers on our bid committee picking a contractor. We need somebody on our bid committee that knows construction, knows how to pick a contractor. We don't need to go with the cheapest one. So to Kevin's point, it's like Jim said, it's in the details. If that contract is locked up, he's got a penalty he has to pay if he's not done on time, but he gets benefited. If he gets done early, he's going to make sure, he's going to manage his own project. He should, and make your life easy. So,
Is that one of the responsibilities of your contract, of what you're presenting to this?
Absolutely. Actually, I was about to make a comment. Thank you for mentioning that. I'll tell you a very quick story. So I've been in the planning, programming, and budgeting part of the initial process of project development, the design process, and the construction management and the bid selection process. I've individually supported all of those roles and led teams that have done those roles. And I found myself in one organization where the planning and budgeting and programming team conceptualized something and then handed it off to a design team who went, who in the world did this? And then they designed it and then handed it off to a construction team, and they went, who in the world designed this project? And this is why we propose some of those services specifically in this contract, is because if you can have one entity, one owner representative who is involved in each one of those stages, you clean up so much of that because they have a keen, clear understanding of the needs from the very get-go.
that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. While this doesn't do exactly what I envisioned, it is a step in the direction. Just a couple of questions. The contract is for how long, Kyle?
It's indefinite, but it has termination provisions at will, essentially.
So at will means if either
you don't
party
like
is
us.
unhappy, we can terminate.
I think we got to give you 30 days notice before we kick you off, but I think that's all.
Okay.
Working at the pleasure of destiny.
And I like that. Determination of which projects go to them is done by who?
That's done at a staff level and based on what Matrix will take. So,
Now, in the model we used, which is what the school board used, that decision resided in the school board, or in our instance, the city council. That would be, if that's not in there, then I wouldn't vote for it. But as
And do
we're
we just
going,
real quick, if it gets approved, maybe in the motion, just make sure that that gets included, because I don't believe that's in here if that's how the council wants that.
I will. And as we talked about the design status, having been the representative of the school board to the construction management for a couple of years, I understand how important that really is. Because if you start off with a mess, you're going to end up with a mess. And while this, to me, is an experiment to see if Matrix can do what we need and that we improve our process, I know one thing's for certain: what we've been doing hadn't been working. And so I will make the motion to accept or enter into this contract with the stipulation that the final decision on the assignment of which projects shall go forward will be made by the city council at the recommendation of the city manager.
Second.
All right, don't go away.
Anything else?
We
Let
have,
me just issue one clarification, because the city manager did lean over and whisper to me that he thought the city council would have the decision-making authority on that anyway, but I like that you included it in the motion, because that clarifies everything.
okay, and I got a couple round tours, but stand by for a second. Would Jeff like to say something, sir?
I was just going to mention that the individual task orders for each project will become before council for their approval.
So now we got covered both ways, correct? It's actually in the contract as written, plus in this motion, it'll be clarified.
And my other observation is we had a board or a council representative that worked with the construction management company and the school board version of how this worked, and it worked out pretty well. And I would like to see that in this also, unless you tell me we can't do that.
You can do that. It should be in there, because this is the school board's contract, just modified slightly, but why don't you go ahead and amend your motion and just make sure it's in there, rather than us sitting here and reading 12 pages and making
Well,
sure.
I would certainly do it the simple way, if that's,
Yeah.
okay, I'll make that as an amendment. Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. Jeff, you're covered. Is there any further questions for this gentleman so he can sit down and then we can have our discussion that round, or just leave him there and we'll, as we're talking, he can answer some further questions?
It certainly wouldn't hurt, I would think, to have him there to answer questions.
Stay put.
Okay.
All right, that's why it's just, I just going to clarify. Mr. Smith, you're up next.
Thank you. This might be more for staff, so you're off the hook for a minute. But,
Okay. Thanks.
Well, Jeb, man, the fixed fee percentage type of contract, a lot of our projects, big projects so far, are grant work type of projects. So is this type of cost or fee, is that like part of the grant, money would go towards also paying for a fee like this? Or is that more of out of the city's budget on the side?
It would depend on how the grant was applied for and what different line items are in the grant. For grants similar to the Restore grants, like Clement Taylor Park or Royal Melvin, those fees would not be included in that grant money.
Like moving forward in the future, if we were to have this, we would take that into recognition to apply for grants considering these costs that we might
Well, it's certainly something
incur.
we would like to build into the budget for those, and if they were approvable, if that's an eligible expense, then we would hope to have that included.
And then,
I can actually address that a little bit, because I've been through your financial
Okay.
documents cover to cover multiple times.
Sure.
The bulk of your capital improvement projects, there's a budgeted 8 to 10% specifically for project management. And then on the grant side of the house, because I'm also familiar with writing state grants for Florida, there's often a matching portion depending on who you want to go through. And a lot of times that'll go towards meeting the requirements for that matching portion. So.
okay, thank you. And then a lot of the things Mr. Babby mentioned, and, the continuing services types of items that we have continuing service contracts for, does this contract allow them to also be one of those types of individuals, companies as well, as besides just project management? So if we ended up wanting to use, like, I'm all about using one company if it's part of the contract. I mean, why have 3 different firms, you know? But does this not allow them to still do our engineering or design?
I believe the master services agreement does allow for that. If we build that into that particular task order for that project, we can build as much into that or as little as we need.
Right. I think previously there was concern about using them, but they're not a continuing service contractor, rather than using our engineering firm that is, and there might be a conflict or legal type of issue, but there's no concern with that. They could do it all if we chose them.
They could. I think the concern was that we already have design engineers on staff or, you know, as continuing services contractors, so they wouldn't necessarily do that piece, but they could. Or
Right. I mean, I hear we have them on staff or we have continuing service, but I just want to make sure that they would be able to, if we sign this contract, that we would be able to use them for those things if we chose to.
Yes, you could up till a certain point, which is described in the CCNA.
Right,
which I'll-
got it. All right, I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Bagby?
Yeah, I would just ask that you add scope besides assignment of their work, that we approve the scope, because all these tasks that they say they can do, we might not need that entire scope on every project, or we might not want that entire scope. And so I would, you know, just assigning them as the project manager, I would also like for us to approve the scope on each individual project.
I think that's very well said, sir. And that's, I think, what is the really nice things about a task order-based contract. Now that we've got this full suite of opportunities and options, for each task order, you can just kind of cut it down to precisely what you need and only what you need. We negotiate a rate percentage based on those requirements, then we're off to the races, so.
Well, do we ask Ray to repeat that motion? Because it is rather convoluted at this point. You got it, Ray?
Let me read what I have.
Okay, and then we can approve on that if we need be, because I want to go ahead and take this to a vote. Go ahead, sir.
Motion is to authorize city manager to execute the master services agreement with Matrix Design Group for capital project management with the following caveat. The city council will decide which project will go forward with a recommendation by the city manager. The city council will approve the scope on each individual project.
And the city council will have a designee that will serve as a liaison on each project.
Okay. There we go. So we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. Let's go ahead and take this to a vote. You can have a seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the easy questions.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. Congratulations. All right, sir.
Thank you, sir. Second item is the Water Quality Improvement Fund, Resolution 22-13. And we have Ms. Crystal Strickland online with us, I believe. Crystal, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
I'll turn this over to you.
Okay, so basically this is an accounting cleanup. We established these two funds, one of them back in 1987, one back in 1995. They're both intended for water quality improvement. Currently, they're being accounted for in a capital project fund, but the funds, according to their descriptions in the ordinance, they're allowed to be used for operating type expenses, which is maintenance. So we're establishing a special revenue fund to track these two revenue sources in a type of fund that we can use these funds for maintenance. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Council, any questions for Crystal? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution 22-13, Water Quality Improvement Fund, to track activity of the Stormwater Trust Fund and NPEB fees collected.
Second. Got a motion, got a second. Any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, let's take a vote. Ayes have it, so moved.
Item 4C is regarding the Crosstown connector and the stormwater design update. I believe we have Ryan here to make the presentation.
So good evening, Council and Mayor. Are you ready to have some fun? All right, so my goal tonight is try to go through my professional opinion on how I see this kind of getting to the finish line. And I want to try to get to that to be able to get closer to getting a shovel in the ground. And I want to also work in the future with getting a kind of a park design integrated with this roadway design. I've kind of met each and every one of you, almost all of you face to face. And I want to try to get to know you. So I want to give you a little bit more background as to kind of how I'm going to view this project and where I go from here. I came from a civil engineering firm in Fort Myers, worked there 13 years in project management. And the nice thing about that firm was they're 75 years old. They got a lot of history in Fort Myers. They've done a lot. They made a lot of mistakes. We've learned from those mistakes. One of the head engineers for our water resource division there, he's worked there for 45 years. I was in his office a lot, talking to him about drainage issues, talking about drainage options, trying to figure out the best way to resolve things. So what Atkins has presented, we've dabbled in all these different types of designs. With that said, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I just want to keep things moving. So the first thing that I did was go back and watch the August 1st council meeting. That was before I started here, so I just kind of want to get a feel for what's going on, what was said, what's the thought process. There's three things that came from that I took from it. One is flexibility in design to allow for a park, potentially. Two, made it very clear, 2-lane road, not a 4-lane road. And 3, cost, which is generally always a concern. So I put together a quick little slide. And of course, you guys have seen this. I'm kind of beating a dead horse showing you this plan. This is something that's been talked about a lot. But what I wanted to focus on was a slide that was presented on the August 1st City Council. With that slide, Atkins presented 5 different options for you to choose. So I was looking through these 5 options. 2 of the options, the manufacturer could not provide complete data as to how much it would cost to install their system. So I decided to discount those as 2 options. And generally, if you look at those options, they're only charging for material. Well, you're going to have 1.5 to 2 times that cost in installation and getting the rest of the stuff in. So when you put that inflation on there, those 2 options, even though they look the cheapest, are going to be right in the same ballpark. The third option is storm trap. That's the most expensive option, so I kind of discounted that option also. So that narrowed it down to just contact and ADS. I've kind of highlighted a couple of the differences between the two. So obviously ADS is about $77,000 more cost. But look at long-term, look at the maintenance, look at what you get for your product. Long-term, contact will need to be serviced about 4.5 more times in a 15-year period. So that's public works time, energy, effort to maintain the system. ADS requires less maintenance. And then also just the duration of the product. They're claiming, I don't necessarily agree, 100 years for ADS, 75 years for contact. So now contact is proposing a corrugated metal pipe system. We've had many problems in Fort Myers. There's a high-end gated community that was built in the 80s that used that. And they're having it rust out, roadways collapse. We're having the same issue here in Indian Bayou with that same pipe. So that's another reason why I'm leaning towards the ADS. And we also have this ADS system installed under Mountain and under Melvin Street already. So I kind of listed here, just to simplify, the pros and cons of both. The other pro that I see from StormTech is that system is proposed to be plus or minus 6 feet deep. 6 feet deep. Contact is about 9 feet deep, so obviously the deeper it goes, the harder it is to maintain. The problem with the corrugated metal pipe option is there's a coat or a sealant on it to stop it from rusting. During construction, if the contractor nicks through that sealant or coat, that's where the rust will start. During maintenance, they stick a jet down there, nicks it, that's where the rust will start. So, to me, the corrugated metal pipe is not a great option for the city of Destin. And then if we look at the layout, so this is the new revised layout. This layout provides the volume that meets the minimum required water management district standards. This layout provides only 6 cubic feet more volume than what the minimum requirements are. So it's not over-engineered, it's not over-designed, it's meeting the minimum requirements. One thing that we got to remember is, a couple of sessions back, it was mentioned we were talking about beach acquisition. God is not making more beach. Well, we have a small city here. God's not making more land to develop. So we have to start thinking outside the box. How do we most efficiently use the land to get what we want, to provide the flexibility we need? That is meaning that we're going to have to go away from the old school traditional sheet flow into a swale system. Over time, those swale systems are not maintained correctly. They fill up, you lose volume, and it just kind of backfires. Not only does the swale system fill up, where the sheet flow of the road goes off into the grass, sediment builds up there. Grass starts building up there. Then you get puddles of water on the edge of the pavement. To me, we need to start looking at these alternative options. Of course, the alternative options cost more money, but they can provide the flexibility we need in the city to do what you want to do, to provide the services you want to provide. In this particular instance, this is a more expensive option, but you can get your park. What excites me about this design is they have cutouts for trees. So we can get trees planted throughout there. Anybody out there playing in that park would not even know what's underneath their feet. So I'm excited to take this design from Atkins, once it's 100% done, and work with everybody to figure out what kind of park do we want to put through there. I picture it meandering through the trees there, having workout nodes on either end, having benches, shaded benches. You know, there's a lot of options. We can have a dog park in the corner. There's options. This provides options. If we look at that and compare that to Contact, Contact is a little bit of littler, smaller footprint, but it's deeper. Like I said, deeper, harder to maintain. And more than likely, it'll rust out and start to fail. So the very last slide is just simple examples of what this corrugated metal pipe can do over time. Therefore, in my professional opinion, after reviewing the previous meeting, kind of getting up to speed on some of the history, and taking into account the council's desire, I do believe the ADS StormTech system would check the boxes that you guys are looking for to be checked, to allow the flexibility needed for the city to provide the services that you want to provide to the citizens. So I'm looking forward to getting Atkins to the 100% plans so I can start working towards a park design for everyone. Any question?
Any questions? Thank you.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second, so now let's have a discussion. Mr. Bagby. Thank you, sir.
No, don't run off.
Oh, don't run
I
off.
want you to explain your diagram on the ADS, which is what the motion is on. So go back a couple of slides. Okay, so you have actually you have 4 different colors. You have blue, you have tan, you have the hatch marks, and then you have the white, the carve-outs. Just explain to us what each of those represents.
So we have Atkins on the line to help with that.
Oh, okay.
But I think the orange runs are kind of like There's certain lines in there that are meant to be where everything gets pushed to and you can clean it out easier. So there's, that kind of stuff is what's shown there, but if, yes, so if Atkins is on the line, if they can explain that.
Okay.
Hi, thank you, Ryan. This is JB Park. Yes, the different colors you're seeing on the exhibit, yellow shade is the standard run of pipes that account for the attenuation and treatment volumes. The 6 individual red shapes, those are the isolation rows, and that is what is designed to accumulate the sediment and be accessed periodically by maintenance.
Okay.
Vacuum cleaning and cleaning out the system.
Okay. No, I want to thank you, and I just want to confirm that if this is installed, basically it'll be level, except for maybe where you build up around the trees to cover their roots for the whole length of that park.
Yes, it can be flat above the park. We can add more fill. We can shape it how we want to shape it.
So, and I had one other question, probably for the engineers. The volume is the same. What is the load? Because one of my concerns was it looked like y'all were building this to a standard where we could drive pickup truck, or actually dump trucks over. What is the load-bearing capability of this system that you propose to be installed?
JB, can you answer that?
This is Scott Wesson. Once the cover over the chambers is brought up to 36 inches, it will support a live axle load of 32,000 pounds, which would be for a dump truck.
Okay, because that was one of the 2 over-engineering questions that I asked the staff early during my time with them was, what's the volume? And the volume obviously is about the same as the swale, more or less. And what is the design load? Because we shouldn't be driving dump trucks out there.
But we could.
Well, but we shouldn't, you know, then people will say, well, you're building it for dump trucks so you can put in 4 lanes. No, I don't. I want it to be a park. I want it to support mowers and maybe a pickup truck emptying trash or something. I don't need it to support dump trucks. That's my only concern. I mean, I love what you've done. I won't vote for it, but I just think the load-bearing capability of that park is too much. And we might be able to save a little bit of money if we draw that down, just, you know, cut it in half or something. Thank you.
Yes, we can do, yes, everything's doable. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is so this volume is designed with only like 6 cubic feet more than what the minimum requirements are. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into a design that is exactly what's needed for that road. Because anytime we go in and we want to change something or add something to the park that's more impervious, now we've got to provide more volume to treat that. And if we pigeonhole ourselves into this design at the bare minimum volume, and we want to add, I don't know, let's just say a basketball court. Well, now we got to account for that. Pickleball, yes, sorry. Now we need to account for that. And in order to account for that now we got to dig down to the system and figure out how to enlarge it. So Pond 1 and Pond 2 are 2 different drainage basins, 2 different elevation designs, so we can't interconnect the 2. So I would encourage us to kind of over-design a little bit of volume in this to allow for us to design the park that we want and make sure we have the volume needed in there to have the park that we want.
Yeah, I'm fine with the volume. I'm not sure. My only concern remaining is we've over-engineered the load capacity or capability of a park, you know?
Understand.
Yeah.
Understand. Going back to your asking what the colors are, were you provided this? So the second sheet of that, does show the coloring better, and it does explain what all the different features of that is.
And And I know the cost is a concern for a lot of folks, but if we were to buy a piece of land that had that square footage, it's going to be a bid of $1.4 million. So at first, when I saw the cost, I was like, that's going to be a hard sell. But then you think about the actual fact that, do you want to have, we've already bought the land, so do you want a ditch? Or do you want to buy a new $1.4 million park? Because that's what that land would cost if we went to try to buy some land in that neighborhood. So we got, I got Kevin, then Mr. Braden, and then Mr. King. So Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Appreciate it. A couple questions. One, where does the money come from? The effective budget just says it's just the difference between underground systems and traditional ponds. So we do this, $1.4 million. Where's the money for that?
Crystal's question.
Yeah, I would have to get back to you on that.
Crystal?
I can answer that.
Go ahead.
If council gives the direction to pursue this option, then Crystal will look into it and bring back a potential solution for it.
And potentials of how that might handicap us in the future.
I mean, we're deciding tonight about moving forward on it, right? And then after the fact, we're going to get where the money's coming from. It's a little concerning.
No, tonight, I believe we're getting direction if this is the option you want to choose, and then we can see if we can find the money to fund it.
Yeah, because I think that was Mr. Destin's motion was clear on that. It's just to proceed. And part of that process of proceeding will be to find financing for the said
Well,
project.
I mean, no, the motion is to move forward utilizing the ADS Storm Tech system in retention area 2. That was the direct motion. It's pretty clear that if we approve that, we're going forward with the $1.47 million underground system. And then my next question to follow up on that is, what happens next? We're going back to what? Percentage? We're going back to redesigning? Where are we going back after this decision tonight?
Anybody answer that?
I'm not sure if that's a Lewis question or. I would like the staff to potentially answer that.
Go ahead, Lewis. I saw you touch your button, so I caught you.
I can answer from a design standpoint. From here, we're going back to the 100, we'll be moving to the 100% if you approve this design. 100% if you approve this design.
If we approve this design, we're moving to the 100%?
Correct. We'll finish off all the design issues.
So we don't have to go backwards at all?
No.
Adding in something that we never even had in the first place?
Well, the only thing that you'll be adding afterwards is the park. What park do you want? But as far as the road design is concerned, if you address these stormwater issues, we'll be done.
So previous concerns of having to step back by making this change I think you're saying it's not a concern anymore because it's not affecting the overall design and the construction, it just.
Correct. Engineers, can you explain that further?
Yeah.
I asked him because at one point I was told you had to go back to like 30% or something like that. So I'm just trying to get some clarification.
Yes, so to answer that question, we are in the process, coming from our previous council meeting, we have started the design for the underground retention. Getting confirmation on system type is just another step in our design process. Once we get this confirmation, we'll continue with our 90% design, which is expected to be submitted at the end of this month. And then continuing on towards 100% design following that. So this is all in keeping with the previous proposal that was presented. I think, the last time we discussed the issue.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad to know that. So I'll just go back to my first question and comment is the money. And it's, it's not even in our packet, which is a little, to me, frustrating that we don't know where the money's coming from. So that's all I got.
I don't think there was anything to put in the packet on the money because they didn't know if we were going to go this route. So it'd be kind of difficult to add that in there other than the cost of the different types of drainage. So I think what we're coming down to is you got two choices here after we finish having discussion is either the original design with the ditch, I hate to call it the ditch, it's a retaining area, the pond, or this drainage system that will allow that land to be used for something other than a pond. Mr. Braden, you're up, sir.
Thank you. This system you're proposing, is it the same system that Chick-fil-A just put in their parking lot, you recall?
Chick-fil-A. According to Joe, it's very similar, yes.
It's very similar, yes.
All right. Mr. King, you're up.
And I had the same concerns as Kevin. I think we asked for a proposal and a plan, and it feels like to me that it's like, here it is, so let's just adopt this $1.5 million. Where does that, I want to know where the money comes from as well, and how does that handcuff us in the future? I'm asking objectively, is this, and the mayor touched on it, is it worth $1.5 million to have that piece of green space? And I get mixed answers from people I talk to, and, if there's a way to just say, hey, look, if there's a way to set it in stone that this is going to be a 2-lane road forever, I think there's a lot of people around here who, that's all they really care about, is that it's 2 lanes and not 4 lanes, and so we'll spend $1.5 million to make that happen. So
that's kind of the decision to be made then, is how much are you willing to spend for flexibility? How much are you willing to spend when
two choices.
We're running out of land to develop?
Yep.
So
And
it's just going to get pricey.
are you just still want that damn bass pond? I mean, come on. Just asking. The first thing that hit me, that's why I wanted clarity. The first thing that hit me was 1.4 million, but then I got thinking about what would a piece of flat land that big cost in the downtown, in the middle of Destin, middle of a residential area? It's going to cost 1.4 million, because how much did we pay for that in the very, very beginning? 5. So, I mean, it's an expensive piece of property. And I think I got Mr. Destin and then Lance. Go ahead, sir.
Just for clarification, where the money's coming from, and I understand where Kevin and those guys are coming from. You back out the cost of the drainage pond, and that's where some of the money's coming from. If we lower the carrying capacity that Mr. Bagby's talking about, that's more money. But, so our cost really isn't that amount. And the other point I'd make out is this project right now is about $5 million over budget, and we've got to find where we're going to get that money too. So we were going to, instead of looking for 5, we're going to look for 5.5 or 6, and we're going to have to come up with it. But it's money well spent to have the option to have a good, nice park in this part of town, which doesn't have one. So,
Lance?
I was just going to add that, if council wanted to, they could make us bringing back options of where the funding's coming from as part of the motion, so.
at some point, I'd say that'd be a good idea, but as I said, we have to hunt for a whole lot of money here shortly if we're going to go forward.
All right. Well, we've had a motion. We have had plenty of discussion, so let's just take this to a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. Mr. City Manager, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Now, an item that will not cost $1.5 million is potential other uses of the old campground area on a temporary basis as potentially a dog walking area on leash. And we have Teresa Aber was a sponsor of this. I don't know if she has comments on it.
Thanks, Lance. We went out to look at it, and I was in heels. I mean, I was not in dog park walking clothes or shoes. And if you stay in the center road where it's already got a paved road, you can walk your dog, keep them on a leash. But the spurs, it is not meant for a park. It is not meant for kids to run around. putting this out there as another area since it's a big vacant, but it's a vacant spur-ridden lot. But if you want to walk your dog, keep them on a leash, take your bag and pick up their mess, it's a wonderful way to give that area of town a nice place to walk. It's a good, what would you say, mile of half-paved road that they could stay on. And I think they did go out and cut back a lot of the spurs, but it's going to be one of those areas where it's just not, it's not feasible for our parks and recreation to maintenance this area. We want to make sure that people can use it for a nice walking from one end to the other, staying in the center. And you must live in that neighborhood because there's no parking and we're not going to make parking. Am I right, Lance? So it's basically opening it up to use it until it's finished being developed, whether that's in the next couple, 3 years or whatever. The point is it gives the locals there somewhere to walk their dogs, somewhere to walk in the evening, you know, before it's dark. It'll be a dawn to dusk type of park walk, okay?
You definitely do not want to get off the beaten path, and your pup won't either. You'll be picking those spurs out of their feet. So, is there a recommended motion here?
I'll do it. I move that the city manager be directed to make all necessary preparations to improve the Crosstown connector property to allow the walking of civilian citizens and their dogs. And I would like to add that there also be trash cans.
No, I don't want to make it trash cans. That's not going to be something that the Parks and Recreation Department needs to go out and clean. If the people pick up their dog mess, they usually have a green bag. I watch people walk down Main Street on the sidewalk, taking it home with them. So we're not going to make this a maintenance issue. So I'd like you to not add that in your motion, please.
Someone else take a motion.
I'll make an alternate motion to approve as written.
Just real quick, for Robert's rules, does Bobby's motion have a second?
Yes.
It did have a second? Okay. We got who was the second on Bobby's? Okay, it died. So, Teresa, you're back. Floor is yours to make your original motion here.
All right, I'll make the motion to move that city manager be directed to make all necessary preparations to improve the Crosstown connector property to allow the walking of citizens and their dogs.
Got a motion, do I have a second? I have a second. Mr. Braden?
What kind of liability will the city have with that if we don't improve that road, or if they get off the beaten path?
Our risk manager did look into essentially whether our general liability policy would cover that property. It does already, and it will continue to cover the policy, or that property, even with these changes. So with that, you know, you've got your same trip and fall hazards like you normally would have, but sovereign immunity typically applies, and we have insurance policy covering us.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Teresa, I have mixed thoughts on this particular topic. I don't think my motion to the whole thing being revitalized will probably come to fruition, just because ideally that sounded like a good idea whenever I asked the staff to bring us what it would cost, what it would take to make that usable. And I think they'll probably bring it to us soon, but I don't think we'll spend that money. But then this, we're opening up a 6-foot wide path to walk your dog on, but also not wanting them to go, don't touch the coal, you know, like floor's lava, like my kids play. Like you can't go over there. So it's almost like, why even do it at all? I mean, is it really worth it? Is there really a need to even? It's already been cleared, from my understanding, so it's kind of already there. But now we have the liability thing. You have them going off, and are people just going to complain? Why am I getting spurs? You know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do we really want to do it?
Well,
is it going to be helpful, or is it going to be a hindrance to us?
It was to give those that live in
Oh,
that
I know.
neighborhood
I want the
a
whole thing to
walking
be open.
area. Right. And we could open it, but we'll put signs that says, beware of the spurs, you know? Nobody likes spurs.
I hear you. I hope it goes okay.
Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, I'm for it, just because, you know, more walking space is more walking space. Is our Parks and Recs that handcuffed to not be able to change another trash can in the city? Is it really, are we that short-staffed?
I was just trying not to add any extra work to their workload since we're not going to make it a big park. It's more of a walking from one end to the next with your dog. It's sort of like stretch your legs.
And, you
go
keep saying
home.
dog, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of dogs, but there'll be more than dogs because now it's a park. So, it's an open park now.
Any one of us can volunteer to empty the trash once a week.
I'm sure I'll be out there picking up trash like the rest of the city.
Miss, you done, Bobby? You good? All right, Mr. Justin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we need to remember that this, for 30 years, was a campground. There were people camping in tents and sleeping on the ground, and once we go forward to let people go through there with their dogs or whatever they may choose, I doubt that they're going to stay on the path exclusively, like there's a, electric fence that's going to stop them. So this is going to evolve, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll keep a good eye on it. And if it is something that doesn't work out, then we'll stop.
All right, got a motion, got a second. Let's go. Ayes have it, so moved. Sir.
Item 4E is Resolution 22-17, repealing Resolution 21-07, eminent domain. And we have Webb and Kyle to answer questions. Webb, you want to kick it off?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. After several efforts to acquire the property at the shore of Crystal Beach and through discussions and significant increases in property value over the past 2 years, staffs from both city and the county currently recommend that we no longer pursue the acquisition of the middle property at the shore of Crystal Beach Park. This action does not forever close the door on acquisition of this property, but it would do so for the immediate future. The first amendment that is attached, the draft, would reflect this joint recommendation from the city and county staffs. Again, with the receipt of the latest appraisal estimates that would go along with the eminent domain process, it quickly became clear that the property value had grown beyond our budget estimates, and it really behooves us to stand back from what may be a real estate anomaly and also consider some other opportunities. What initially started as a contract price of 3.6 has grown to over 7. And with further evaluation, uncertainty is still out there. The draft amendment that is attached to the interlocal agreement is pretty straightforward. It would remove reference to the middle parcel. It would update cost figures and lower the amount advanced to the city from $10 million to $7.5 million, and with corresponding and proportionate lower repayments amount from the city each year. As a side note, this would free up some city funding in the interim, and the county will also be proposing a repeal of related resolutions actually at their meeting tomorrow. So on a side note, I do want to also talk about the county workshop that we had last week, or the county had last week in Shalimar on Thursday. And one of the issues that were brought up was actually a conservation easement that they are looking at, and they wanted to talk to the city about. And I just want to bring that up as a possible opportunity for willing property owners to look at conservation easements that they could potentially sell to the city and or county. So with that, happy to answer any questions. Kyle, I know that there's a lot of legalese here. Would you like to address some of those?
Sure. I'll be brief on the technical details, but eminent domain starts with what's called a resolution of necessity. That was adopted last year. That began the process. It enabled certain flexibility with transactions, and we were hoping to be able to negotiate a voluntary purchase. We negotiated extensively with this property owner throughout the last 2 years, I would say, and unfortunately I've never been able to come to something voluntary that would be acceptable. The resolution here simply repeals that resolution of necessity. The reason stated in there is simply market conditions and current financial conditions of the city and county. If adopted, then we, and I say this as the county attorneys and I, envision that it's not with prejudice to the future, assuming those market conditions and financial conditions change. So it could be reinstituted at a future date, but there probably have to be some sort of cooling off period if the resolution is repealed.
And Kyle, when some people think eminent domain it's a taking of sorts, but a city could come in there and take a guy's property, but in reality, eminent domain proceedings is you're going to have to pay the appraised value as long as that's okay with the judge. Is that correct? And that's what created such an issue with it going from 3.6 million to 7 million?
So the way mechanically it works is if you file it as a quick take, which is how we were going to do it, then as soon as you file a lawsuit within a week, you have to make a good faith deposit in the registry of the court. Once we saw some of these updated numbers, we realized that our good faith deposit would have far exceeded the numbers we had quoted y'all before. In good conscience, I didn't think I could file that lawsuit and make $2 million appear out of thin air, obligate the city in that regard. So we brought this back along with staff's recommendation to not move forward at this point.
And that's exactly why I asked you that question, just for a little more clarity. So we have a few people, everybody wants to speak on this one. So Mr. Braden, you're up first.
Yeah, I'm just real curious as to what staff has learned through this process of purchasing these 3 pieces of property, if anything.
I'll take the first stab at it. I do know that when we work with our partners, like the Trust for Public Lands, and they do a great job for us, that we review the initial contracts, and they have allowed us to do that now at this point. So we learned after the first go-around that we needed a little more strength in the contract that simply wasn't there on the first go-around.
And to be clear, that was the contract between the Trust for Public Land and the actual seller. It is not something that typically the city would be privy to.
The thing that I took out of it was, I believe we drug our feet because I personally kept wanting to know why do we keep messing with this guy? Why do we keep dragging it on? Why do we keep waiting on him? Now we've got to that point where this property went from over 2 years we messed with this guy. It went from $3 million to $7 million. We knew we had to have those 3 pieces of property or wanted them. We bought 20 to the side, and we want to mess with this guy for 2 years when he just go cold on us, and then all of a sudden we hear from him. So it seems to me like if I was going to purchase even 2 pieces of property in the future, I wouldn't drag my feet and wait and put it off and hope he comes around. You know what your end goal is going to be. Just buy it and move on, or do what we got to do to get the property. So I just hope maybe that it's possible next time, and we go at it a little harder next time.
Webb, I know you'd like to address that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say that these purchases are complicated. We have multiple partners associated with this, and I agree, in a perfect world, I certainly would like to see these things happen very quick, but sometimes, unfortunately, it's a little more difficult to happen than what is ideal on that. Again, we have multiple partnerships moving through this and different entities that we have to get funding from, and if you recall, we had the whole funding from the TDC redone last year, which took up an immense amount of time. And there's just a lot of issues like that that contributed to this process.
And I think whenever you think you're dealing with a willing seller, and halfway through the ball game, it becomes apparent that it's not a willing seller, or try to accommodate some things that were asked, like 1031 exchange, or go ahead and do eminent domain so I get a tax break, or those kind of things. So you try to play the game, and if someone's not being, totally upfront, then that's part of the string along. But the other part was exactly what Webb says. We changed the whole tax collection system for our 6% sales tax, which is the funding source, is now totally changed. They added a 5th district and a new contract, and that took almost a year of that process. So I think it was just a convolution of 5 or 6 different events that created that. But at the same time, I think your point's well taken, is that different approach may be needed. It's like deal with a willing seller, or we just don't deal. That needs to be the protocols most likely.
Yeah, I think if it was the end property on either end, it may be, really not that big of a deal, but we're dealing with the property that's right in the center. We closed on 2 pieces on either end, bulldozed those properties, and then we messed around with this property owner for 2 years. a year and a half, however long it was, trying to come to some agreement with him, and we knew we had to have that piece of property. Price of land in Destin is always increased every year. So I think I got a little bit more aggressive with this guy.
Yep.
On that middle piece is also.
Usually the toughest lessons are the best in the end, but they're not
That's it.
so
As
much
long
fun
as we
now.
learned something from it.
Right.
Thanks.
Point from the very beginning. What did we learn? Next up, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. Just kind of, for those listening, what is the conservation easement? What does that mean? I know we talked about it in our briefing, but just for the record.
This is a concept that was brought up at the beach workshop, and the way it was explained to us is that you can do conservation easements, not just on waterfront property, but other property where the public has the right to basically recreate it. It's an easement over a piece of the property. In this situation, it would be from the waterfront to X number of feet from the, it would be defined by a survey. And basically, in exchange for compensation, and Kyle helped me out on this if I'm misspeaking, but basically the easement would allow for the public to recreate on that property from here on out.
Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt.
Appreciate it. A few questions. We start at 3.6, we're at 7.2, you said. Where were we most recent, though? Because I know we weren't most recently at 3.6. The most recent approved number that we were going at after.
It was like 5.3, maybe, something like that.
Okay. And then on Exhibit C, when there's a strike through at $6.3 million, what is that in reference to? Estimated acquisition, center house condemnation, $6.3 million strike through.
I'd have to go back to the series of estimates that we have, but it's well over 7 at this point. By the time you factor in the acquisition cost, the eminent domain cost, and things like that.
Okay. So where does the money go now that's allocated towards this project?
So as part of the agreement, it would be fronted to the city from the interlocal that the TDC funds, from the TDC funds generated by the county. So as of this point, that payment would go from $1 million a year out of the estimated 1.6, 1.7, somewhere in that neighborhood, down to $750 approximately.
And then the beach acquisition funding bucket, do we get clarity on, is it generalized beach acquisition, or was it specific to this project?
Yeah, I did look that up, Kevin. It's just generalized, and it's 13 million was the set aside in the ordinance.
Gotcha. And then 2 years from now, let's just say hypothetical, the guy wants to sell it to us. We're going through the process again of a new interlocal to get funding, TDD approval, kind of like what we've done past year or two, right? We have to go back to find the funding again, or request it, work with them.
Right, it would be the same process.
Okay. You mentioned other options in your opening statement. Are you talking about other options for the 2 parcels? You mentioned, I don't know, you didn't expand, but.
We don't have any immediate options. However, we're always, our ears to the ground.
Right.
And that's all that meant.
Okay. So do we have a plan for the other 2? They're just kind of they just sit as they are for now.
What we would do is bring back an adjustment to the design, and we would maximize those parcels with scalability. And what I mean by that is basically any adjacent parcels to that park, we would just bake into the design where we could easily scale a design to expand into that if council ever chose in the future to move forward, or if we had the right opportunity.
And then Tarpon Beach, phase 2, or phase 2, Tarpon Beach. How quick did we purchase that property?
So that one closes, and a little history on that. That was actually a willing seller, as we all know, and that happened, I want to say, probably January, February of last year. It was a while back. Entered into the contract, secured the contract. The closing will occur in early November.
January of 21 at Tarpon Beach?
No.
Or this year?
This year.
This year,
Uh-huh. And what that will allow us to do is, as soon as we have the closing, we have the demo ready to go, and we will be engaging with the county on to expedite design on that as quickly as possible so we can open up that as quickly as possible for public use.
I mean, my follow-up on that is we talk about things don't go quick, but we moved pretty quick on the Tarpon Beach access. I mean, first time we ever.
Willing seller.
Right. I mean, the first time we ever heard it, it was like the night before we closed on it and voted on it. You know, so
I
we
would
moved
just
quick on that.
I was just going to
I know
clarify.
it's a different purchase.
Right, but that parcel does go back to even before this current council was seated. That was, I believe, the number one rated property by the previous council. So.
Okay. Just following along, I think Mr. Braden said, and I shared this morning, and you know, is my frustration and other constituents' frustration. I mean, the gentleman that was already here, and I've spoken to other people in the public about this as well. I mean, it's frustrating and it's almost nearly embarrassing, honestly. I understand the hindsight's 2020. I understand that can't predict the future, but we've been preaching that beach acquisition is the #1 priority in the city of Destin. And I know y'all have worked hard. I know you've worked hard, but to me, there was other ways that we could have gotten this to the finish line. And that's my perspective and my opinion. We could have gotten it to the finish line. So I don't know sure why we didn't. Now, moving on, because that's in the past, why aren't we talking about buying it still? I mean, the plan was $6.3 million, and we're talking about 7.2 now. So we're talking about $900,000 to finish the gateway to Crystal Beach that we've been promised and sold to, and it's less than $1 million to finish it? Where's the county? Why aren't they here tonight, our partners? Why are we not going to go buy it? We just allocated $1.47 million to an underground drainage facility for land that God's not going to continue to give us. Mr. Destin said that the beach, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Why is that not an option?
Just to clarify, I think the 6.3 was the projected all-in cost. That wasn't the appraised value.
Call it 5.6, 5.3.
So if you're going to add
Whatever you wanna
another to the 7.2 kind of current appraised value, you know, you probably got to take that up to about 8.2 as your estimated all-in cost. That's probably worst case scenario.
And I hear you, but now we're throwing numbers out that aren't even here, and you know, I'm going off of what's here. And to me, it's like, why are we not even talking about still buying it? If the money's not there, I mean, the money's there. I mean, we have $15 million in our account. If the county didn't want to partner with us anymore, we'll just take the beach ourselves, finish the project. This is a beach that's never going to come again, we were told. You know, if we all take Mr. Bagby's idea and go get our bathing suits and sit out there in front of it, our thongs, you know, I heard it was funny, a good idea, but if we go do that, maybe they'll sell it to us. Well, why not just buy it now? What's the baseball score? Guy, sorry.
Is that all?
I mean, me personally, I want to pursue buying it. Ask the county to split the difference with us, 50-50, like our partners, and go buy it. We have 2 parcels next to it. I personally don't want staff to work on any designs on those 2 parcels at all, in my opinion. I think it's a waste of money until we have that whole thing. I don't want them putting any effort into partial designs, what we could do with it. I just want to buy the whole thing.
All right, before we go 1 minute further then, and I got a lot of people that want to speak, we've been doing this up to this point from a staff report. We haven't had a motion. So I'm going to entertain a motion, one way or the other, and then we will continue debate at that time. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 22-17.
A second.
Second.
And I have a second. Were you done before I go any further?
I'm sure.
Okay, all right. Next up, Ms. Abear.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm on the same thought as what Mr. Schmidt said. Why don't we just see about finding where we get TDC to come in and we finish this project, we buy this beach. I don't see why we should just throw our hands up and wait for the time to change. We're already in, we need to see what we need to do and how we need to do it. Maybe go to the owner and say, hey, would you be willing to take 7 so we can just get this done and try and move forward with this instead of just throwing our hands up saying, oh, let's wait a year or two until it cools down. I think it's dumb. We've got 2 nice pieces of beach and that one in the middle. We're kind of strangled at this point. So without belaboring what the others have said, I agree we shouldn't quit. We should just continue on.
Mr. King?
Thank you, sir. I was fortunate to have a conversation with Mr. Lander today. And, he made the good point that this was not a typical, contract for, and correct me if I'm wrong, for residential sale and purchase. This was an option contract. I asked him why he walked, and regardless of the reason, he had the option to walk, and he did. However, whatever the reason is, it's not my business. I'm kind of the mind that some things are meant to be, some things are not meant to be. I couldn't recommend, and with good conscience, that clients of mine move forward with such a thing. That's just my own opinion. Based on where the market is, where the market was, and where it's going, my recommendation would not be to pursue the number that we have in this report. I'm going to probably catch a lot of heck for this, but we've got the 2 pieces that you see when you're coming down Hutchinson Street. That is the gateway to Crystal Beach. This is where it's going to get dicey. In my opinion, those are the 2 most important properties. We own that piece of property. I don't know what we own the easternmost piece of property. Why not sell that, completely move on from this piece of property, and put all our eggs into the number 1 piece of property that we wanted, which was Tarpon Street. It goes back to the kind of initiative that, not initiative, but the thinking that we can redirect those funds. And I don't know if you recall, Kevin, but in our conversations about Tarpon Street, potentially use that money for something else. So that's my 2 cents. You can start throwing your tomatoes now if you want.
Mr. Destin?
Thank you, Mayor. Kyle, conservation easement, I suppose, would be cheaper than buying it. Is that the thought behind that?
That's certainly the idea. I think it was Commissioner Boyle's idea, and I think he specifically said he thought that we could stretch the money a lot farther with large-scale conservation easements, now that we've created the pathways for access for the public to traverse up and down the beach there.
And how do we support that direction?
Well, you can take whatever direction with this resolution you want, and certainly after that, you're free to make a motion to direct the staff to work with the county on coming up with a plan for conservation easements.
And do we have any idea what the difference between a conservation easement and buying the property might be?
We have had some preliminary discussions about that, but we're going to have to engage the services of an appraiser to help us figure out what the market value of those easements might be.
I would think that that's the direction to go, if nothing else. If we accomplish it, that's good. If it would bring pressure to bear.
After we finish this motion here, I'll look to you for that, to make that motion.
And of course, if my erstwhile council members here want to go ahead and take part of it out of reserves and just buy the piece of property, if that's a motion,
there you go.
Maybe one I could support.
All right, Mr. Bagby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple points. And one, I actually like Johnny's idea a lot. I probably could support that. I wouldn't support buying the parcel in question, just for I have learned a long time ago, you don't reward bad behavior. And I don't know this guy. I'm sure he's a great father, great grandfather, brother, husband, whatever he is, but you don't reward bad behavior. The guy strung us along. I'm not sure that he ever wanted to sell it, It really doesn't matter if he wanted to or not. You know, he wanted to get the best deal he could for his piece of property. I respect that entirely. But, you know, I was serious. I would open up all the parcels unless we sell the one on the east, because you have to remember, he does not own that beach in front of his house, south of the erosion control line. And I will go out there every day in the summer and set up a chair. I don't own a thong, but I might go buy one just to, and I might make noise, and I might go by there every night to make sure there's no overnight parking from that rental house in any of those adjacent properties, and tow every single car. And I might, you know, and I'm not an angry person, or I'm not a vindictive person, but you don't reward bad behavior. You never win when you do that. And if we give this guy $7 million, that, in my mind, quite honestly, is what we would be doing, is rewarding bad behavior, plain and simple. I will support your motion to give the staff direction on conservation easements. I was at the meeting. The general gist is, you know, we can get X acres for $7 million, or we can get X acres of beach for $7 million, and it just makes it go a lot further. And but we have to remember, particularly in East Destin, that erosion control line exists, and we expect within the next 2 weeks. They told me they would send me the survey results, because I wanted to ask them specifically, how many feet of beach do we own in front of this guy's house? And he said, well, it could be 30 to 60. Well, that's a pretty wide variant, but we own some in front of it. And we ought to know exactly what the state owns in front of that house. So, but Johnny, I like your idea. You know, if you want to make that a subsequent motion after we do the conservation easements, you know, that's good.
Johnny, if you want to put that on the agenda for the next meeting, you're welcome to as well.
Do that.
Rodney.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just have some thoughts at what Johnny was talking about, but I don't believe this piece of property is going to go from 7.2 million back down to 3 million, or even close. So, and I agree with Jim. I don't want to give this guy $7 million for a piece of property. So my next question, this conservation easement we're talking about buying this? Are we talking about taking this property? School me on that a little bit.
So the idea of the conservation easement would be just like any other type of easement that has a specific effect on property. Here, the easement would be the property owner of the land, of the beach, grants to the city and/or the county on behalf of the general public the ability to use that section of the beach from, you know, I'm just picking a number here, 5 feet from the toe of the dune to the erosion control line for general beach activities such as sunbathing, swimming, ingress, egress, that kind of stuff. So you would buy essentially just one of the small parts of the property owner's right. And the idea would be that that would be much cheaper than buying the whole piece of property, which would include typically a large short-term rental that is generating income. So that's the idea.
So why, there's been lawsuits, South Walton's been in lawsuits with this for years. I'm thinking, why would any stretch imagination would a homeowner be willing to sell his beach?
That's not those lawsuits. The only lawsuits they were involved in was when we did the beach nourishment, and they won those lawsuits before the Supreme Court.
Guys, I don't want to be disrespectful, but we got a motion on this resolution. We may get a motion to talk about this conservation easement, so let's just go ahead and vote on this motion right now, and then I'll entertain a motion from Mr. Destin or anyone else, and we'll carry on that discussion. So,
Can we get the motion?
Go ahead and read the motion again, please, Ray. And I've already clicked my button, but you guys can hold off just 1 second while Ray reads the motion. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, my understanding is recommended motion is to adopt Resolution 22-17 and direct the city manager to work with the county with coming up with a plan for conservation easement.
I think just the first part of that, just the resolution. That's right. And so if the resolution passes, then the staff and myself, we will not have the ability to file the eminent domain action. Just want to make sure that's clear since it wasn't specifically spelled out.
Okay. So we are clear and on the public record. Let's take a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, I'll entertain a motion about the conservation.
Yes, sir. I'll move that we direct the city manager or city staff to pursue, in cooperation with the county, the acquisition of a conservation easement.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any further comments on this one? I think we kind of covered it. Rodney, you didn't get to finish your deal. You have any other questions about the conservation easement before we go to a vote?
I just don't know why people would sell that piece of land.
They don't, and if they don't, you condemn just an easement. Sorry. They may well and probably won't, but then you're back to the situation where you're going to condemn an easement that is much, much cheaper than the entire parcel, which is going to cause some very interesting consequences.
And then a question on that. So this money that we would use for the easement, is that still through the TDC and that's still through all those? Okay, thank you.
That's right. I think they would still be subsumed by that $13 million
Yep.
set aside, was the idea.
Yeah, two things. First, the direction to staff on conservation easements is not just for the parcel that we just voted against. It's for whole village. We can buy or get conservation easements on the harbor, we can get conservation easements on the bay, we can get conservation easements anywhere. And just so Bobby understands, the conservation easement, this is done all the time where people still own their land. Help me, the conservationists in Walton County that did the huge.
Ngosi?
Yeah. Okay, that's conservation easement. They still own the land. It just gives people the ability to birds or the whatever to restore it. And so these people would still get to use the beach, or they would still get to use the harbor or the bay, wherever we executed this. Yeah. So, okay.
Only point I'd make, Mayor, respectfully, is it's like a road easement or any other easement. You get a specified use, and the price is not nearly what it is if you bought it. So that's the route we need to go down if necessary. And by repealing the ordinance to condemn that we just did, that doesn't mean we can't negotiate to buy.
All righty, we've had discussion, we've got a motion, so let's go ahead and take this one to a vote. The vote is unanimous, so moved. All right? If, with no further ado or no further motions, we're going to go to announcements. Go ahead.
Thanks, sir. Just a couple tonight. We have a joint CRA workshop scheduled for this Wednesday regarding the undergrounding of utilities at 5:30 in this room. It's a public meeting and the public is welcome. Any comments for council members who wish to attend?
I'm just going to advise that we go ahead and notice this as a CRA meeting for the city council as a board that sits as a CRA. So that way, if the council wants to attend and comment, you're welcome to. So if we could get on that, I would just recommend that.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we have our city's open house this Thursday, October the 20th at the Community Center from 11:30 to 1 p.m. It is a fish fry, and there will be fun entertainment, and there will be booths for each department highlighting their responsibilities, along with booths from a number of our partners. So we hope everyone can attend that. Get there early because the fish is really good, and it goes fast. Finally, we have our annual Fall Fest back in action after a couple years off because of COVID, but Fall Fest will be back in its original form in the gymnasium at the Community Center, October 24th. That's a Monday from 5 to 8 p.m. So we hope to see all of you there too. That's all I have, sir. Thanks.
Thank you. And it's 7:58, so let's take a quick break before we get into our public hearings and our council comments. Back on the road. Everybody take a quick seat. We have 3 public hearings tonight. So without further ado, Kyle, take it away.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First, we have item 5A. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2215CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin amending appropriations for certain expenditures, expenses, capital improvements, and certain indebtedness for the City of Destin, Florida for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021, and ending September 30, 2022, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
And seeing as it's a public hearing at this time, if anybody in the public would like to come up and make a comment on the first reading of ordinance 22-15-CN, come on up and have a say. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public comment period on this public hearing and entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve ordinance 22-15-CN on first reading.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none? The vote is unanimous, so moved. Kyle.
This is item 5B. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2216CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to livery vessels, providing for findings of fact, providing for a 6-month extension of the temporary moratorium on livery vessel permits, directing staff to develop recommendations for regulation of livery vessels, providing for severability, providing for expiration of moratorium on June 30, 2023, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
And seeing how it's a public hearing, at this time, I'll entertain any public comment on the first reading of ordinance 22-16-CN. Come on up, sir. Just state your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Gene Eisman. My address is 775 Gulf Shore Drive. I'm the new president of the Water Sports Coalition, and I just wanted to make a couple comments. One, there's no major opposition to what you guys are doing, moving ahead with this and such. However, there's some concerns regarding once the demand's capped, or once the supply's capped and the demand's still going up for liveries, we're getting a lot of illegal liveries operating. They're saying they're bareboat charters, which is a livery, and I just wanted to specify that there's no difference between a bareboat charter and a livery, and just we'd look for some enforcement on that area. So,
and one of the things, and I would like for you to take this back to your group to talk about too, is a discussion with our staff as this harbor capacity study comes to fruition, stuff like that, and see if you guys could come up with some ideas, especially as it pertains to Coast Guard, with this distinction between livery and bareboat, because maybe there needs to be a moratorium on that as well, because right now there's not, and you're suffering the consequences of it.
yeah, well, there's really only 3 types of vessels in the harbor. You got the inspected vessel, okay? You've got a livery, and you have a 6-pack charter. And what's going on is people are using 6-pack charter slips, but operating under a bareboat agreement, which allows them to have 12, which cuts in, which makes it a livery. And that distinction is really clear that they're one and the same. And the parking problem persists because of it. So we just want to make sure that on the radar enforcement.
So noted, staff. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. John?
John Stevens, 4025 Indian Trail. Just to piggyback on the parking that you were talking about. So 6-pack uses 1.5 parking spots. A livery vessel uses 3 parking spots. So that's definitely something y'all need to look at. So really what I'm going to talk about is in y'all's first reading, it's pretty much talking about directing staff to develop recommendations for regulation of livery vessels. I sent out a detailed email earlier today, so really I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but really pretty much just wanting y'all to clear up the ambiguity of the City Ordinance 17-02 CC with a couple items that I emailed. And then also, so Maya, Charles, and myself, we were actually on the Okaloosa County Water Board Safety Committee, actually with Ms. Teresa, And we had a lot of good ideas that we created, and I'm hoping that we can definitely start adopting some of that into that ordinance also. Once again, I'm not going to go into too much detail tonight. I emailed it out to y'all. All right, that's all I got.
All right, John, we'll make sure we take a look at that. Staff, Kim will be all over it. Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
Maya Schilder, 45 Ferry Road, Northeast Fort Walton Beach. I did have one question. I'm not arguing the point of the moratorium right this minute, but I would like to know the precedence of a temporary 5-year moratorium, because temporary and 5 years don't necessarily mesh. And is there a precedence for any other temporary moratorium for any other industry that is this long? And staff and legal can get back to me and counsel at any point on that. Thank you.
That would need to be directed by the council, of course, if you want that research, but that's up to you.
Thank you. You know the routine.
Mike Abity, 530 Harbor Boulevard. I'm going to get a little history here. Back in 1920, the United States government decided it wanted to put a moratorium, came up with a moratorium. So it came up with a moratorium on alcohol. And they passed a law that you couldn't manufacture, distribute, sell, or consume alcohol. What this did, in essence, created a severe black market. Okay, along comes a guy named Al Capone and a bunch of his cronies, and they made millions and millions of dollars off of this moratorium. And everybody's scratching their heads. They don't know how to stop these guys. They're selling more liquor than before the moratorium. So what they did was, the head of the FBI hired a guy by the name of Elliot Ness. And Elliot Ness was not a member of the FBI. He was a special agent with the Bureau of Prohibition. He put a team together that got real creative, and they came up with some really creative ideas to go after these guys and put Al Capone and some of his cronies out of business. But the rest of the country couldn't come up with solutions. They're scratching their heads. Guys, we've been scratching our heads for 2 years how to stop these rogue operators. What you've done, not unintentionally, I'm sure, is you've created a black market. By putting a moratorium on the good guys and the legal vessels, you have a huge black market. If there's a demand for 250 boats on a Saturday afternoon in the summertime, and we can only provide 200, there's 50 vessels out there that are being illegally operated. I did some calculation. There's been over 1,000 illegal rentals, okay, in the city of Destin over this past summer. That's over $1 million worth of business that goes untaxed, unpermitted, that the city's losing money on. Okay, we're just letting these people operate. Everybody's sitting around scratching their head. I did a public records request from January the 1st to the first week of August this year. There have been 5 verbal warnings. There have been 0 written warnings. There have been 0 citations. There have been 0 fines. It all goes to a matter of risk and reward. If I'm a bad guy and I'm doing something illegal, okay, and the risk is, what is the risk? 0 fines, 0 citations, 0 risk. And I can make $40,000, $50,000 a year renting this pontoon boat illegally? Wow, reward versus risk, guys, come on. It's a no-brainer. These guys are making a killing. The city, the staff has come up with no viable solutions to solve this problem. I'm going to make a few recommendations. If you give me an extra minute, Mayor, to make a couple of recommendations.
I will, because I don't think there's a whole lot of people want to speak on this public hearing, so I'm going to give them a few minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think I'll need all that time, but I want to make a few recommendations.
And our code enforcement, she is online listening.
I'm going to take the Elliot Ness approach of being a little creative here. It might be unusual, okay? You catch an illegal operator. that doesn't have a livery license, that's a $10,000 fine, folks. Is it legal for the city to put a $10,000 fine on a, you know? I don't know what the legalities are, but I'll make the suggestions and the recommendation, and y'all can take it. It's in your hands after that. $10,000 fine for operating without a livery license, okay? A $5,000 fine for operating without a BTR, and you're not going to have a BTR if you're illegal. The people that have BTRs that you don't want to fine them, you give a $5,000 fine, you have 48 hours to get in compliance. The good guys, the businesses that just didn't know they needed one, they got 48 hours to get in compliance. The illegal guys, they can't get a BTR in a year, so you fine them $5,000. If they get caught using a city park, Joe's Bayou, any other city park, $5,000 violation. Okay, now you hit them risk and reward, $20,000 worth of fines, and on top of all of that, seize the vessel. The sheriff's department, the Coast Guard, they catch vessels or automobiles or vehicles used in illegal activities, committing crimes. You seize the vessel. You take these guys and you hit them for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 worth of fines, and you seize their vessel. Now what's the risk versus reward? Okay, and I'd like to add one more point. Okay, I personally, anybody who turns in, I'm going to offer a reward. Anybody who turns in, gives information to staff that ends in not arrest, because you're not arresting him, but somebody getting putting these guys out of business, I'm going to give a $1,000 reward to whoever turns in that information.
Thank you, Mike. Now I got something to do after November 7th. All right. Mike, I just want to share with you that I've had this very conversation with Kim about putting more teeth in our ordinances. It's just like what you're explaining, because you got to make people pay. Because it's not fair to the people that do it right. You got that, sir? Thank you for your comments. And anyone else here like to comment on this particular ordinance before we go further? All right, I'll close the public comment period at this time, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve ordinance 2216 on first reading.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. Without any further discussion?
Yeah,
Let's go ahead.
I do.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't see your name up there. Go ahead. It's
It's
okay.
okay.
You said it. That's good enough.
Thank you. Apologize. The extension is till June 30th,
Correct.
Right.
2023.
I wanted to be proactive on a couple of things, and so please express how we can do this. I don't want to wait until June to start talking about a lot of these big things that we want to do about regulation. So can we already start looking at in the beginning of the year, like a workshop or something for this specific
Yeah.
thing? Go
So-
ahead and get it on the calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the plan. The extension through June is to give us from January to June, because we anticipate getting the complete study analysis results in January. So that would give us from January to June to come up with the regulations. So we would intend to have a workshop within a few weeks or a month of getting the results.
Okay, so that's on our radar then.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the only other thing is, I guess it's not here nor there, but Mr. Abady, I mean, you spoke the gospel 2 years ago in similar ways, and I appreciate it then, I appreciate it tonight. But as you have stated, and you know, nobody's, unfortunately, I don't think nobody's going to get your reward anytime soon, because we got to seal the deal. And I don't know if we're going to, you know, as of now, I don't see how we'll be able to put somebody out of business the way that we're running right now. And that's an issue that we have to figure out how to do immediately and not wait until March, April, May, or June of next year. So the moratorium and the language Kim is talking, I mean, I get we got to wait until the study, and then we're going to do a workshop, but the season's starting in spring break. The illegal operators are starting before we do some of that stuff. And so simultaneously enforcing what we already have in place, we don't need to change any regulations or rules. There's some very clear rules tonight in our code that are not being enforced, that could be enforced. And so I'm all about the moratorium and extension and working on regulation, but I'm really hoping, again, that we will enforce as it is and hear some very specific plans for this coming up season of stopping these rogue operators and whatnot. So, but that's all.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Braden.
Thank you. Mike, I appreciate you, buddy. But to be truthfully honest with you, catching these guys with our code compliance department is not going to happen. You can forget it. They couldn't catch them if they was doing the act in front of them. It's just not going to, I mean, your results of your public records request says it all. You got 3 or 4 warnings? I mean, 5 warnings? I mean, come on. So to tell these people that we're going to crack down on these rogue operators and catch them is, we're lying to you. It ain't going to happen. So we're going to have to think outside the box. We got to come up with something else. And I'm with you. I'd fine them $20,000 if I could, but we can't. And I think all we got is what, $500 a day, or maybe the max. And then they got to go in front of the magistrate and get them in front of the magistrate. That's a joke. You can forget that. So we got to think outside the box and do something else. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the answer is, but we got to come up with something. I just hate to keep telling you guys, oh yeah, we're going to do something. We're going to crack down. We're going to get them. We're going to stop it from happening. Because it ain't going to happen, I can tell you. I hate to say that, but it ain't going to happen. We got to come up with something else. I'm open for suggestions, ideas, but what we got working ain't happening.
Kim, would you like to address any aspect of that?
Sure.
Penalties and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think Mr. Abity is more creative than the Florida legislature, maybe, because they don't allow us to impose fines like that. We're limited under citation authority to amount much lesser than those. Of course, now the special magistrate is actually more of our teeth, because that's where we can impose eventually a fine of up to $500 a day. The first fine cap is actually $250 a day, but a repeat violation is $500. And that does add up, where I think, and I've been talking, the code compliance director and Lance and I have all been talking about ways to make the process more efficient. And I think, we have some ideas. The warnings do need to stop. There does not ever really need to be more than one warning anymore in this city. Everybody knows the rules. If they are operating and they don't know the rules, then they are woefully inept at their jobs. So at this point, I'm not seeing any reason to give too many more warnings to anybody. They can have shorter times for compliance. And if we increase the special magistrate hearings to every other week rather than once a month, then there would never be longer, presumably, than a 2-week at most time for the whole process to be over. Because if you see a rogue operator and you give them a week to come into compliance and the hearing is the following week, that's it. Then they're at the magistrate and that process has begun and we'll get the daily fines. And the same thing with BTRs. Again, the legislature has us limited on how we can charge those as well. But we have things in the code that can be enforced now. And it's challenging from an evidence perspective sometimes, but staff has had lots of discussions with how to catch them. And I think we met also even with the stakeholders and the livery vessel companies, and we brainstormed. I think that was prior to the current code compliance director. So maybe we have another one of those meetings with her now, it might help. So, I think we should get all of that going and just, sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
So under Florida statute, because I think we're at the point now where warnings should not even be an option. It should be a citation because they do know they're operating illegally. So you give us.
Everybody has been warned.
Yeah, so you give us, you give a written citation by Florida statute. How soon can those fines start being accrued? From that moment forward, can we get before a match, if they get a fine, or a violation on Monday, do they have to be in front of the magistrate the following Monday?
So there's.
Kind of give everyone
Yeah.
a little clarification of just how tight we can ratchet down on this.
There's two separate parts to the code enforcement statutes. There's the part that deals with the special magistrate process, and then there's a separate part on citations. The citation limit is $500, and those can be issued immediately, technically after a warning, but everybody's been warned. We've been talking about that. So a citation can be issued every time you see them, up to $500 under the state law. You don't need to go to the special magistrate for that. But you have to keep catching them and issuing a citation, and then you have to get those citations paid. The special magistrate process is the one that everyone probably thinks of as more cumbersome, because that one requires notices to go out and a reasonable time to comply, to be put into place, and then going to the hearing, and then having fines imposed, and then it usually involves a second hearing where a lien would be imposed if they're still not in compliance. But that's what I'm saying, we can tighten up greatly. I think, 30-day warning periods for something like this probably don't really make sense. These kind of warnings need to be a lot shorter if it's ever going to get resolved, especially when the season is a season and it doesn't go all year. So we can't be dragging out the process. Not saying that code compliance is doing that, but just learning from experience, we can't do that.
So I know we got a motion on the floor for this, and this is hearing about and I don't want to get too far off in the weeds. So one of the things that we can expect then is a report after you've worked with these folks of how we're going to approach this during this moratorium period.
And I think there's lots of things we can do. And like I said, the new code compliance director was not here when we had the meeting with the stakeholders. So I think that would probably be a very productive first step, if they agree. Yes.
John, y'all have another opportunity at the end of the meeting to talk. Yeah, go ahead. It's not going to hurt. I just don't want to get into this aspect too far because we're talking about a temporary moratorium. Just
Sorry,
go ahead, real quick.
From what I understand, it's $500 per passenger that gets fined, not per vessel.
I think we're talking about two different statutes. I'm talking about Chapter 162, and I think you're probably talking about Coast Guard, but.
Just recently, SB 606 was signed into law. It is a new livery law through the Florida legislature that will regulate all of our industries, and it actually can be $1,000, I think, per day, but $500 per person as well. It really strictly regulates us through FWC, and I will be discussing it, I guess I just found out, in November in Panama City. They were supposed to discuss it in Miami last month, but the hurricane stopped that. So
All
that has a whole new layer of legislation.
That'll be part of what we got coming up.
And yeah, and when that becomes effective, we can talk about that too. But Chapter 1, right, but not right now, and Chapter 162 is different from that, but that will be a good improvement when it becomes effective.
All right, Ms. Tracy, and then we'll take this to a vote.
To adding on to all of this that's been said, I agree, and I'm happy that we are going to come to a better, quicker turnaround, start putting the fees in these people's hands. And like I said, the code compliance director was going to be online tonight. She said she wasn't going to be able to be here, so I know she's hearing all this, and hopefully we can get this fixed and take care of those that are legal and doing the right thing.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, and we have a second, so we're going to go ahead and take this to a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. Mr. Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last, we have item 5C. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and we have Candy Gray of Emerald Coast Permitting, Inc., on behalf of Wayne Lung of Heron's Nest, LLC, submitting an application for City Council review for the construction of a 26-slip commercial marina to be located at 105 and 109 Calhoun Avenue. With that, if I could go ahead and get everyone who plans on testifying in this matter, applicant, members of staff, any members of public who plan on testifying, to please stand and raise your right hand. Whoever's applicant, stand up, Mike. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth? All right, thank you. Now, starting with Kevin again, we'll see if any ex parte communications have been had.
Just I had conversations today and researched the agenda item.
Okay, and do you feel like any of that would prejudice your ability to make an
No.
impartial decision today?
No.
Okay, thank you.
None.
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 I spoke to several people in the community, but it will not affect me at all on how I vote. Thanks.
Same, I've spoke to several that live on Calhoun, but it will not affect my decision-making tonight.
None.
All right, and with that, I will turn it over to city staff for initial.
Thanks, Kyle. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as stated, this is a proposed commercial marine project proposed at 105 and 109 Calhoun Avenue. This project was heard and received recommended approval by the Harbor and Waterways Board on Monday, September 26, 2022. Also, the project requested a variance from Land Development Code Section 11.0501M, which pertains to the maximum dock length allowed within the Choctawhatchee Bay. Per this ordinance, the maximum length along the Choctawhatchee Bay is 1.5 feet per linear foot of water frontage. The boundary survey and plan submitted showed 208 feet of waterfront, allowing for about a 312-foot pier. The proposed project is proposing a 392-foot-long pier due to an identified environmental sensitive area by FDP of seagrasses within the first 100 feet of the shoreline. This variance request was approved at the regularly scheduled BOA meeting on October 5th, 2022. Between the plans that were submitted to the FDP and the Corps and staff, there's some inconsistencies because some slips have been eliminated in order to meet the slip density. So staff is recommending or requiring the applicant be required to revise the resubmitted plans in order to match at the time of building permitting. It is worth noting that there are 2 existing docks at the site, and portions of both structures exist within 25 feet of the riparian lines. The dock to the south will retain 1 boat slip or lift as identified on the site plan, while the dock to the north is identified to have the existing boat lift removed. However, the dock layouts are to remain the same. Staff has reviewed this application for commercial marine construction and determined that the plans comply with the City Land Development Code and regulations, aside from the approved variance requests for the maximum length of the dock. So at this point in time, the Harbor and Waterways Board recommendation is consistent with staff's recommendation, which would be approval with the conditions that are outlined in your staff report provided to you. And the applicant is here tonight to answer any questions as well as staff.
Thanks, Daniel. And Mr. Mayor, I just ask that you allow Mr. Buckingham, if you're presenting on behalf of the applicant, go ahead and make your
Go ahead, sir.
Mayor, Council, thank you. Mike Buckingham, 510 Calhoun. If you have any questions regarding this, I'd like to answer, but the staff has just told you the reason we're asking to go farther out is because of seagrass.
Mike, will the portion over the seagrass have that perforated
Correct.
Walkway?
Correct.
So the sunlight gets to it?
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Any questions for Mr. Buckingham? Go ahead, Mr. Braden.
Is this, I guess, for the Upland restaurant, for docking for that? Isn't there supposed to be a restaurant?
Yes.
On this property, and that's what this is for?
Yes, sir.
Thank
It's coming. Work in progress. Waiting on subs material.
Mr. King.
Thank you, sir. The docks that, or the slips that you have allotted, or the allotted slips you have, what are the uses of those going to be exactly?
Well, good question. I think most of you all know up here for the past couple of years, I've been pushing very, very hard for the city to have a city marina to protect our fishermen. And I'm strong on that. And what we're attempting to do here is to keep the deep sea fishing guys in the harbor, but bring the bay boat fishermen a place in the bay. So our goal is to have bay boat fishing bring back the fishermen, allow the fishermen to sit here and have a place to operate their boats and their businesses. That's what we're hoping for.
How big are most of the slips?
They range, the range.
20 foot wide?
Yeah, they range different, because they're all gonna have boat lifts. Everyone will have a boat lift in it.
Is there any way to put in as a condition that that would be who would use those slips? I don't know if that's, is that,
Say that again?
that's, if that's not allowed, I'm saying you're saying that that's what it's gonna be, that's what we're pushing for.
Right.
You know, it sounds great to a guy like me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, if that's not doable, that's not doable, but as far as making those allotted slips for those guys in particular, I don't know if there's any way to do that.
Why?
I'm saying to make it so that those slips that y'all are, as a condition, that those are for those guys. There's enough need.
Right, I don't know why there should be a condition. That's what we're using our docks for.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Schmidt. Oh, sorry, John.
I'm gonna make a motion and then I could discuss afterwards, but if that's okay.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you were asking for
We're in the presentation portion.
Yeah, after presentation and then public comment.
Okay.
Then I'll entertain a motion, so.
Well, I mean, since you're up here and you made a couple of comments back to Mr. Braden and Mr. King, you told Mr. Braden that this slips are for a restaurant.
No, that's not what I said. He
He asked, he said, is this for a restaurant that's
Oh,
coming?
no, I thought he said, is.
So
I thought he
you
said
said
there was-
yes, but then he. so I
Oh,
just
I'm
wanted-
sorry, I
It's
thought
okay.
he said that, is there also a restaurant on the property? That's what I
Okay.
thought he said. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no.
So your answer to Mr. Braden is.
I'm sorry, Rodney, I didn't hear
Not.
that. I thought you said, is there a restaurant on the property also?
Okay. That was my only follow-up question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. King.
Would y'all, and this is just for, I mean, we're getting rid of those, you're getting rid of those first 6 slips. Would y'all
Correct.
consider bringing, that's a long dock. I was looking at it on Google Maps and was shooting a line out there to it's 392 feet right now, and it's gonna obstruct every view north of it. Would y'all consider bringing it back those 3 slips to shorten it just to those 3 slips?
I would prefer not to.
Sure.
I mean, I really would prefer not to, but I just found out tonight, and I wasn't aware of it because I'm out in my boat almost every single night. I go out there and take my dogs out there and go for a little fish finding. They love to fish.
Yeah.
And I just found out tonight, Valencia's 300 feet out there. I never knew that. They don't seem to be that far out there. So I said to Bill tonight, I said, wow, if you're 300, 396 or 392 is not that much farther. It doesn't seem like they're out there that far.
Mike, one of the things I saw in the plans, we get a lot of west winds.
I know.
And I didn't see any breakwater
I know.
for this dock.
Correct.
Is that something you've taken in?
That is something we darn sure take into consideration, yes, sir.
And so you may have to come back and request a breakwater,
We're probably
construction
going
of
to
a
have to.
breakwater.
Yes, sir.
Of course, you'll have to go through DEP for
That
pilings and
would
all
be our
that.
first step, is to
Okay.
DEP and the Corps, yes, sir.
Okay. It has nothing to do with the
Right.
approval of the project. I was
Correct.
just,
Yes, sir.
when I saw the plans, I was like,
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we're aware of that.
be a
that
little
bay over
choppy there on a 25 knot nor'wester.
Right.
All right. Any other questions for the presenter? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you all.
And now, at this point, I'll open up this public hearing for public comment on this proposed permitting of this project. Is there anyone here in the public that wants to make a comment? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close it at the time and entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that the city council approve the commercial marine construction project located at 105 and 109 Calhoun Avenue, subject to the recommended Harbor and Waterways Board conditions and all applicable federal, state, and city permit requirements, and to add one condition that the city council has final approval on the development order.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion on this motion?
I'll add that I'm adding that, one, because we're looking at something we're looking at one piece of a puzzle right now. We're looking at a dock. Roddy talked about a restaurant. I didn't know what that was about. So how he got that from this presentation, I don't know. But I just would like to see a whole plan before it gets finally approved as a minor or a major development order. So that's why I want to have that
Mr.
condition.
Destin, okay. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Destin, sorry.
Just a question, can you have a final development order approved without council approval?
So, I can answer that. So the restaurant, first of all, comes from the existing development order. They have a development order from, I think, 2013 that approved a restaurant, bar, and so on. So they would, for whatever they're doing now, they'll have to do some kind of an amendment to that DO, right? So that is going to get approved either by staff or the council. With this motion, definitely by council. But there are minor deviations that don't come to council. We don't know if this would be a minor or a major deviation at this point because we don't know what the whole proposal is. But at this point, with your motion, it will come back to you with the development order if that motion is approved.
Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none. Go ahead.
Still probing here, what kind of minor deviations could,
It's in the code in chapter 2, what distinguishes between major and minor. I don't know if Lewis wants to get into the details, or Daniel?
Yeah, so the Land Development Code defines a major deviation is something that either changes the condition that was expressly exposed by council. So if you put a condition on development order and they're wanting to change that condition, that would automatically qualify as a major deviation. Any intensification would be a major deviation, but if they're just going from same use to same use, no intensification, that would be something of a minor.
For example only, because I don't know if this is what's going to happen, but if they were just going to modify the existing parking requirement in the existing DO by a couple of spaces, let's say they were adding 3 spaces, that's not something that would come back to council. It would probably be a minor deviation. But if any of the things that Daniel just mentioned were triggered, they were going to do something more intense, they were going to change a city council approved condition or anything like that, it would be back as a major.
so doubling the number of spaces, would that be a minor deviation required?
That would probably be a major DO.
I don't have any more questions.
All right.
No, well, because it didn't have a dock before, right?
Does have a,
It has, not with this many slips.
correct.
So one of the things that we got into out on Noriega Point, and Mr. Lewis said he would never do this again, is bring us something that created demand, because we said we would be working on any docks would have to have parking, right? These are permanent. There's only one transit slip, right? So there has to be parking associated with these. That's what we agreed upon when we did the Noriega Point thing, unless, I'm tired, but I'm not.
No, you're right.
So let me just respond to that. If Lewis wants to add to it, that's fine, but they are going to have to provide parking, and that's coming in their development order. And we would love to bring that information to you tonight, but they needed to get this dock at this length, they needed a variance from the Board of Adjustment. So they went through this process first
Okay.
before determining what they were going to do for their development order. And there are different parking requirements based on what types of vessels go in those slips.
Right.
If they were doing charter fishing boats, those requirements are different than, for example, a livery. So that all has to come out in the DO process.
Which is why Kevin wants it brought back, I would assume. Thank you.
Yes.
Real quick, do the existing docks not, they don't take anything away from the new construction dock length? They don't factor that in as far as what does that make sense? Are you not? Yeah, the allowable length of new construction dock, is that not, are the 2 existing docks on that property, do they not take that into account?
The way the code reads is it doesn't say in totality, it just says maximum length of a pier.
Okay. And you guys, staff, y'all believe that we're well within land development code to pass this? And the variance that they got with the Board of Adjustments was for the the grassy area.
Was for the length
Yeah.
and the justification for the length, and the reason it wasn't a self-imposed hardship was because DEP required that sensitive area to be exempt from where they put slips.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Seeing none, I already hit the voting button prematurely, I see. Go ahead. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, that's it for that. Moving on to number 6. We will start with 6A. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the first question I have was what was said earlier tonight during the public comment. I guess Ms. Bell said that she felt threatened or something by our code compliant deputy officer. I guess staff won't take any type of action or anything on that unless she comes in and files a formal complaint?
I was going to ask, Marcy, I think that everyone takes that seriously. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, feel free to file it. I'd be happy to work with you on that process. We did pass a formal complaint process recently, so if you'd like to, you can always call me and I can help walk you through that process.
Is there, do we not have anything in place that if somebody like that really didn't want to file a formal complaint, but we know about it, that the city or the staff wouldn't take any type of action?
I would have to review the complaint process in detail. It's been, 2 years since we passed that, and I don't work with it on a day-to-day basis, but I can look and see, and if it's something that would rise to the level of initiating a complaint process, I'm sure staff will initiate the complaint process regardless of whether Ms. Bell wants it initiated or not, because that would be required under our policy.
That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Bobby. I heard you say I didn't know if you were pressing on. Go ahead, sir.
All right, I don't have anything official, just, after talking from Crystal Beach residents who complain about parking and not getting enforced, to Holiday Isle trash, and then not getting enforced, to short-term rentals of the village of Destin, and they're not getting enforced. I'm very excited to work with our new code compliance director to solve these problems. I'm very optimistic, and I believe that we can solve these problems, and I hope we do, because from east, west, north, and south, it only seems to be one specific problem that we really need to tackle. And I think it takes all of us to tackle it, not just one person. So I was throwing that out there for everyone that I've talked to over the past month. It all goes down the code, and I'm really excited, and I'm optimistic that we have the right director to make this happen. So thank you.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move that we instruct the city manager to have staff install a raised pedestrian crossing at Cybert Avenue, similar to the ones that are located on the corner of Calhoun and Zerby. And so that one would be at the other corner next to the city's parking lot there. Yeah, I'm going to allow them to figure it out, because I know that asphalt's hard to come by. I also know that you can buy those rubberized ones that you put into the roadway itself. So I'll give staff the option to come back with an opinion
That
for us.
rubberized one probably would.
Lance, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yes, sir, thank you. Michael's actually done some research already on it, so if you don't mind me giving the mic to Michael.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Spoke last time about this same subject, about the cost of an asphalt speed hump to be installed, about $7,500. I did get a quote back. I was researching the rubberized version. It's kind of modular. Those are actually more expensive. They're $9,100, and that's not shipping or handling. So they are more expensive than that.
How about a stop sign?
Okay, so I did mention that to the city manager. If you feel that a four-way stop at that intersection might be a more plausible option, I mean, it'll actually bring people to a complete stop.
The only issue I had, we discussed that about 3 years ago, and staff at that time was fearful that it would back up all the way up to the intersection of Calhoun and 98 during rush periods. And the price you got on the modular one, rubberized, we need to look a little more. I saw some in the magazine the other day that's quite a bit cheaper. So,
Okay, well, just for clarification, there's a difference between a speed bump and a speed hump and a speed table.
oh, I get it.
But,
It's determined by the
well,
speed.
a speed table's flat on top and would provide a flat walking surface. Speed humps and speed bumps have a convex surface on the top, so it'd make it a little difficult to walk across.
We want the same thing we installed over on Calhoun.
You've got it.
All right.
Got a motion, got a second? Take a vote. Ayes have it, so moved.
Got it. My friends from Calhoun tonight, when we were talking about the Crosstown connector, queried us about what the intersection plans were or what we might be able to do to improve that. And I know that somewhere back in the archives, there were some plans that we had discussed. One-waying one-waying Stallman or some of the other roads was part of it. Lance, can you find those so we can see what the city has looked at and what DOT has proposed? I know that we looked at something that was about 1,000 pages long about 3 months ago, that it was in there somewhere. What we need to do is have a comprehensive look at what it is that DOT plans, what it is that we've suggested, and try to come to some solution or conclusion on what in the world we're going to do at that intersection. So I will ask you all to get that to us. I know we only have one more meeting, but we need to be looking at it as soon as possible. And the other item that I would point out to, and I know the mayor knows, our old ex-mayor Ken Beard passed away a day or so ago, and I just wanted to remember him and his family in our prayers. He spent an awful lot of time promoting Destin, and I sat next to him for 8 years, and I know he dearly loved Destin. He was a mayor, he was a charter boat association member. He lobbied on all kinds of tourism issues, and we mourn his passing.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. Mr. Bagby.
Well, before I get into my agenda item, I'll ask the question, does the city have the ability just within the city limits to lower its flags to half-staff? And if we do, could we do that until his internment? I think that would be appropriate for a guy that did as much as Mr. Beard did for, and I don't know if I have to make a motion or if the mayor can do that on his own or how that works. I don't even know if we can do it, but I would think within the city limits, we can do that at city installations.
I would say if you want to tonight, you can direct us to do it if it's possible. I think we do need to look at it. Hopefully we can do it, and if so, and that's a direction, I'm sure city staff.
I'll make a motion that we direct staff to do it while they're researching it, and if it's not possible, but it'd be good to know for future if we can do it just in the city limits on the city facilities.
Second.
Yeah.
Motion is second. Let's vote. Ayes have it, so moved. I think it'd be a very respectable thing to do.
Yeah.
For Ken.
Even though he was an Aggie, you know, I didn't hold that against him.
There you go.
Okay. So under my name tonight, I put code enforcement or code compliance or code compliance process. And just want everybody to take a deep breath for a second, you know, because I know this is a hot button issue, but the thing is in the 9+ years I've been up here, it's been the #1 issue all 9 years, except for the small period of time when those helicopters were the #1 issue, okay, coming out of the airport. And so historically, we've had problems, and historically everywhere has problems. It's the #1 issue probably in the county. I know it's the number one issue in the adjacent county, and they've got I think, 20 just for beach code enforcement. Okay, not counting their street, what they call their street code enforcement. And I know lately, there's been some issues about signs, in the right of way. Somebody's taking my signs, maybe it's my opponent, maybe it's his opponent, maybe it's the code compliance people. And I would just say, I don't know who is, but please don't take people's signs. But if you're doing code compliance and there's signs in the right of way that don't belong there, you take them and you do. Because I've had some of my signs before in other campaigns where they're back behind the building. I go back there, I get them. I try to find some place where I can put them in the right of way where they don't pick them up, but eventually they get them all. But I really want to talk about the code process, and because we're beating the heck out of our code compliance folks. And not all of the problems we have with code compliance are with the code compliance team. They are our problem, okay? And some of them, in two respects, we don't educate the citizens on what the process is and what they should be doing, and we don't give code compliance the tools they need. I gave the staff, I think, probably 6 months ago, and I think I mentioned it, adjacent county decided to go from reactive, which code compliance is always, you have to wait on a report, somebody has to give you their name, they have to give you their contact information, you go to the help desk and you click on it and you fill out the form. They did a proactive for a very small subset, because I don't think we want to empower, nobody, not just us, nobody wants to empower the code enforcement people with the ability to go yank signs and, tow cars and do all this other stuff. We want a nice, friendly city where people follow the rules, and sometimes they don't know the rules, and so I might take exception with, we do the $10,000 fine, which I know we can't do anyway. But the process is real simple. We have a help desk. You go online, there it is, okay? And you click on the help, go back to the previous page, if you can. I want to walk, you have the help center, and you go down there, scroll down a little bit, see right there, the second one from the right, and you click on that. Now you can click on that, and this pulls up that, and you can make a complaint about 40 different things, or 32, I can't remember what the count is. You fill it out, and you get a tracking number, and you get that tracking number sent back to you. We did one this afternoon, and I have been using a stalking horse or a mule or whatever you want to call them, because just to beta test this to see how it works. Because I know if I put in a complaint and I use my name, boom, I bet that thing gets fixed before I even get home from my office. So I use somebody else's name, a real citizen, their address, and their email when I get a complaint, and I submit it. And I see, and guess what? When you go through this process, not only is there a tracking mechanism, but it gets resolved. Okay, every time I have submitted one, now I'll find out tomorrow if the one that was submitted today, but she got her number back, her tracking number or her request ID back. And then we have a tracking process where we can go through, because it generates a report. I don't know if you can pull up the report, well, but it'll tell you what, when it was submitted, who submitted it, what's been done, every step of the way, so that if we want to go in and track it, we say, hey, pull up, request ID 3560, and boom, there it is. Who did what to whom, when they did it, and how the process works. And so we can follow up, and we can say to the city manager, why did it take 3 weeks for somebody to answer that or to go out there or to do that? There are other things, and oh, by the way, the good news is, in February, this gets linked to Compass. Okay? So everybody in the whole city can go in and look and see what the system, what the status is of their complaint. What can we do? Well, we talked about some of the things Kim told us. You know, get rid of the warnings. But I'm over the warnings. And I know that's what they teach them at the code compliance school, because I was over those 20 guys for the beach code enforcement, and they would come back after level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Oh no, you know, we have to give them a warning. We have to observe personally the violation. We have to do, you know, all those little steps that they teach them how to be good code compliance, because they are not sworn law enforcement officers, or they're not deputies. I'll put it like that. They actually are considered enforcement. Get rid of the warnings. Define what the adjacent county did, said, we understand we're going to keep the compliance process the way it is, except for parking in the right-of-way on these very specific areas. County Road 30A, Scenic Gulf Drive, and a couple of the north-south feeders that I don't remember. And they tailored that, I believe it was an ordinance, but it may have been a resolution. They tailored it very specifically, empowered the code, and told them, you fix this problem, this specific problem in these specific areas. I assume we can do that. If we want to do signs in the right-of-way, or we want to do parking in the right-of-way, or we want to do livery vessels, and we empower them, no, you don't need a complaint. If you observe it, you can go down there and you can write them the citation. But we haven't empowered them to do that. We've just set up here, and we've complained for 15 years, okay, that code compliance, and probably longer, isn't doing their job. Well, we got to give them the ability to do the job we want them to do. So we identify the job we want them to do, and we give them the ability to do that. Yeah, we can give them shorter compliance periods. You got till the sun goes down to get that sign out of the right-of-way, or to get that car moved, or to get that trash picked up, or to get that couch out of the street. You know, but we've got to do that. We got to stop pointing the finger at code enforcement and look in the mirror and fix the problems that need to be fixed ourselves. So I'm going to ask the staff to set up or come back with recommendations, okay, on how to fix, and any recommended, y'all see the complaints, y'all get the same emails we get. What are the top 2 or 3 that maybe we do ordinance or a resolution, and we say, in these specific instances, in these specific areas, we want you, there is no citizen complaint. You can make that enforcement action yourself. But that doesn't exist, to my knowledge, right now. So let's stop complaining and let's start doing. Kim, you want to say something?
I think we currently can be proactive. I don't think we necessarily have to pass an ordinance to be proactive, but I think the struggle for staff is more, what should the priorities be? And I think that input from council as to what those priorities are could be very helpful to staff.
That's what the adjacent county, they didn't try to do everything to everybody. They said, this is our number 1 problem, and we're going to fix it. Sorry. We're not going to fix it, you know, north of the bay, and we're not going to fix it, you know, in Sandestin. We're going to fix it in these specific problems. So, and then they empowered their code to fix that problem. We've got to help the staff. You know, sending 100 emails and yelling at them is not going to help the problem. Let's do our job, and then we can follow up once we've properly empowered the code. And I know there are people up here who disagree with what I'm saying, and I respect that. But until we do, for me, until we do what I feel like our job is, we got to stop beating these people about the head and shoulders. And they're not perfect, but we got a new code director. I've got faith in her. I want to give her a chance, but I want to empower her empower her and her team to do the job we want them to do. Thank you very much.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to back up what Councilman says. We do need to have priorities. We'll give them to the city manager, he gives them to the staff. The other thing we need to give them support on is we need to train the code enforcement people so that they have a clear understanding of what the ordinances say. Because I know if you do not understand what the ordinance says clearly, then it's very hard to enforce it. And I would look for our city attorneys, either Kim or Kyle, to do some workshops with them. Once we've got our priorities, then they need to sit down with those ordinances and say, okay, this is what it says. So this is what we're going to enforce. So I support the initiative, and it's two-pronged in my opinion. Priorities, and make sure they have the knowledge necessary to go forward and enforce the codes in a manner that is lawful.
Mr. Brady.
Thank you. Jim, one thing I want to clear up that you were speaking about, this process that you was walking through wasn't 100% accurate. You can file that complaint, but after that, you have no idea what goes on. Because I've filled several of them out. And once you get the report, and then they send you your email that they've got it, and you can go back and look, and they've assigned it to somebody. Other than that, I went to the city manager's office trying to find out what's going on with it. They had a hard time finding out because code compliance has, I guess, their notes and their things, what they're doing that we can't see. So I have no clue what was going on of my complaints. And to speak about your signs, yeah, the city manager decided to start picking up signs, and it was, timing's everything. And it was real bad, in my opinion, that 2 days after he didn't get the 3.5% merit increase, he decided to start picking up campaign signs. And they were supposed to pick them all up, but for sale signs aren't being picked up because we're trying to help them. Why aren't they trying to help me or help somebody else? So if we're going to if the code says, the ordinance says no signs in the right of way, and this council passes that ordinance, so why does the city manager get to pick and choose which one he wants to enforce and which one he doesn't want to enforce?
Okay.
And then, hold on, I'm not, so in one of my complaints, and you said the code compliance department, the code's been a problem for 15 years. We've been complaining and complaining and complaining and complaining. We've made motions up here and they've passed. Nothing changes. I file a complaint. I was complaining to the city manager for 2 months about feather signs and A-frame signs. Nothing ever got done. So I went online and I filed the complaint on the form. Code compliance goes out there, and this is a feather flags and A-frame signs that are being taken in and out every day. Code compliance goes out and gives them 2 weeks to get in compliance. Now that's the kind of mentality we're dealing with. Something's being taken in and out every day. I'm gonna give you 2 weeks to take it in and stop bringing it out. So I don't know, and I've asked Kim. I've talked to her about things, and she's told code compliance, yes, you can enforce this, you can enforce it, and they won't go enforce it. So I'm with you. We got to do something. It's been going on 15 years, but I have no idea what we're going to do about it, or what can be done. I'm at a loss.
No, and I won't address I won't even address what I'm not going to address. Number one, the compliance, because we didn't get these. You have to understand how these folks are trained, and maybe we don't have that knowledge collectively up here, but they are trained just like the deputies are trained, particularly in areas like this where we depend upon tourism, where the people who are doing it right depend on those tourists to rent those boats. You don't want to, start towing every car that's parked, because if we did, after a while, we would all be happy because we would know not to tow our cars because, we would know to hire legal livery vessels. But people coming down from Nashville or Indianapolis or whatever, They don't know they can't park there. There's not a no parking sign, and, it's a space, there's no lines or whatever. So they try to get compliance, voluntary compliance is what they are trained to achieve. That's their objective. And so they try to be nice, and sometimes they're just too nice. I'll be honest with you. It's just like, well, I wanted to give them a warning, and I agree. Everybody out there's gotten their warning. The warning time is over. But until we tell the code department, there are no more warnings, period. In the city of Destin, you ain't getting a warning. You put a sign out in the right of way, I don't care if you're a realtor, I don't care if you're a whatever, it's coming out of the right of way. You're not following the short-term rental ordinance because you got your sign out in the right of way that says, Bagby's BB house, 16 cars allowed and 80 people can sleep here. Nope. I agree. If we say, if that's our intent, we need to tell them, hey, zero tolerance. We've never said that. Why? Because we want to be an inviting community. We want to be a place where people want to come back to and spend their money and, eat at Dewey's or get land, air, and sea or, everybody's businesses. We want to do that. My experience, you take that request ID, you can ask the city staff, hey, can you send me the history of 3680? Now, we did have a problem. There was a period where we had a problem where people, the staff, the code staff was doing something, and then a week later, they might put it in, or they were off for 2 days, and, I'll get around to actually inputting what I did, and then they forget some things. I think Lance and Kim and everybody has gotten that fixed. I believe they have, where you take an action, it goes in, so that if they're off for the next 2 days, if I call Lance or I call code department, oh, that your complaint number, your request ID, yes, here's the current status of it. So I think we have and I know when it gets integrated with Compass in February, it should be good. I get both sides of the sign thing. People want it to advertise their business or their activity or whatever. I would be okay if we didn't allow any signs in the right of way, but I'm probably, and realtors, part of it's hard to catch because if I'm doing an open house, we had an open house in our neighborhood this weekend. There was a sign in the right of, open house. Well, it was only there for about 3 hours, and then, we can't be everywhere at once, and we can't expect the code folks to. You're going to have violations, but we have to give that direction to the code compliance folks and to the city manager.
All right. Is that it, Tim? Thank you.
I got a question for Kim on that. So, we definitely want to be Southern hospitality, and every week it's a different person parking on the right of way for short-term rentals. Do we have teeth that we can impose to the owner?
Yeah, for parking in the right-of-way?
Yeah, so we're not disciplining the person that doesn't know, but we're disciplining the person who knows
Yeah.
or doesn't care to allow or inform their guests that, hey, there's only 4 spots and you get 4 spots. And if
Yeah.
they come with 6, I think the owner should get penalized and not the 1-week vacationer.
Yeah, and that's kind of an example between the 2 different processes, right? Because if you put a citation to the person driving the car, that's going to get the tourist or whoever the person is that's driving the car. But if you use the notice of violation process, you're getting the property owner because under the statute, that's who gets served. And there's a reason for that, because ultimately, if a daily fine gets imposed and a lien gets imposed, it's going to be on the property owner's property, not on the car.
Thank you.
Your turn. Yeah, let's
All
keep
right,
going.
so I have a couple of really cool things. Catherine just forwarded us all an email that she got about the high school tomorrow. Fred Tripp Tolbert is going to be talking to the students at Destin High School tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And he's going to be presenting a generous $1 million donation to the sports program at Destin High School, which I think is fantastic, so I'm going to make a point to be at this because I'd like to see it. Also, Destin High School is playing home on Friday night this week, 7 o'clock at the Destin Middle School. The tailgating is at 6 o'clock at Lulu's. Hope to see all you Destin football fans out there to support the team. And then thirdly, the Fall Festival that Lance had did in the announcements, Monday, October 24th. Just so you know, there are carving contests, so if you want to do a carving and drop it off at 3 o'clock to get judged. And then don't forget, all your little people can be dressed up. We do give out prizes for the little best costumes. And then the only admission price is a non-perishable food item. So come out on Monday, October 24th at 5 o'clock at the community center and enjoy the Fall Festival. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Mr. King.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Destin, you took the words out of my mouth about Captain Mayor Beard. He was a wonderful man. He was never anything but kind and was I knew him fairly well, and he was just an incredible man. So I think having flags at half-mast is an incredible, wonderful way to honor him. So thoughts and prayers to their family. I had a question real quick for John Stevens. I think you had mentioned a while back that, I can't remember exactly what it was, and I guess I could have talked to you after the meeting, but just for the record, didn't you say something about come May 2023, that everyone was going to be required to have a boater's license of sorts? I've mentioned that to a handful of people, and they're loving that. Is that?
Well, at the next meeting, I will bring you a summary of that new law. It's not in effect yet. It will be next year. But there are other penalties in it as well, because in addition to the licensing with the state, there's like misdemeanor penalties and different things. So I will bring you a summary, and I will even share it with you and see if any of us are missing anything. Okay?
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Schmidt.
I appreciate it. I got a few things, so just be patient with me. First, Mr. Bagby, I hear what you're saying. There's a lot of truth to what you're saying, but you also painted the perfect picture of how it's not how it's working. I mean, I hear you, but we also tell people right on that same page before you get there to call as well. So that process, it's an option, and we need to do better at making it very clear what to do. But you painted a very perfect picture. Unfortunately, it's not always happening, in my opinion. Is Ms. Corbin online? Is she online? Is anybody online?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Talking about code, we're supposed to be getting a quarterly code report. Has that been expressed to you, Ms. Corbin, about that?
Yes, it is, and it'll be November the 7th.
November the 7th? Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that's right. That code report, I think Mr. King asked for a while ago, for a quarterly one. So I think there's, like Mr. Braden was talking about signs. The issue is that we have given those directives that you're talking about, Mr. Bagby, and we have given those stern directions. And for example, it took moving mountains to get the flag and the A-frame signs off of 98, multiple meetings, but overnight there was right-of-way signs taken without any direction from any of us. So those are some of the concerns and issues of enforcement or directing, or council directing versus manager, I guess, directing or whatever. So those are the concerning issues about we're picking and choosing. A couple ideas I just want to throw out there for consideration to staff is the Harbor CRA, possibly Town Center, but mainly it's Harbor CRA. Could we look at utilizing funds to hire, I don't want to know if you want to call him a security guard, I mean, in the past, I've had citizens talk to me about security issues on the harbor. People sleeping, homelessness, concerns about that. Well, we also have talked for a number of years about a harbor code enforcement officer that we do or don't have, and, you know, could we utilize this money from that CRA to hire somebody that's specialized with a security or criminal history, you know, past, that their sole job is to enforce on that harbor outside of using a code compliance department separately? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Enforce codes?
Well, I'm not sure if we want to enforce codes. I mean, I guess enforce codes. So then do they have to be a code enforcement officer to enforce our codes? Maybe. Or can we almost deputize somebody to almost enforce the law that's not a sheriff's department, but, you know, ultimately using CRA, harbor CRA funds to do something like this? Just think about it.
I can talk with Crystal. She got offline a little
That's
while
fine.
ago, but I'm sure we could look at using some of those funds to hire additional
Right.
code officers.
Well,
as
the
far
problem
as
with
law
hiding-
enforcement, we do not have that capability right now.
Right, okay. And it's kind of twofold. One, it's past people have talked about safety issues on the harbor. So one, I was going to bring this up a while ago, and I haven't, is hiring somebody that's possibly helping control after hours on the harbor. Well, at the same time, if we tried hiring a code compliance person to focus on the harbor and focus on the waterways, and I think it's been hard, or they can't because then they get pulled away somewhere else. And so maybe if we zoned in our focus on something different or more special, we might get more luck. The Clement Taylor Park, the grant, I've been going back and forth. I think I brought up at the last meeting about wanting to start the project. There's some unclear confusion. You know, my frustration is people have been asking about it for over a year. In the past, it was we were told that we have to wait until Royal Melvin's done. And then that discussion became, we haven't gotten the grant yet. So I think we're all clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lance, but we're clear that we're not waiting for Royal Melvin Park to get done, that we are going to, once we get the grant, start in some way or another.
That's right. Yep.
So can you give me an idea of what starting would be on this project, either Jeff or, like, where will we start once we get this grant? Where are we at in the process or progress right now?
Jeff, do you want to talk about this? I can give you a brief overview of where we're at right now. We're updating the plans for the park to make sure they're still accurate. We now have our own engineer, which he's actually today gave us a bunch of very good ideas on those plans without
Were y'all interested in what he said?
without changing the elements.
Will we be able to utilize a project manager on this particular project, or
I
are we
believe-
beyond that
No,
point?
no, we could use a project manager on this.
That's good to hear then. This is a harbor capacity study. Can you verify, are we looking at the buildings as well on the harbor? Buildings, usage, parking, things like that? What's out on the harbor?
I don't know what you mean by buildings.
Like the structures that are on the harbor, structures that are there, that aren't there, that are temporary, that are permanent, parking for those structures, things like that.
It's more uses and parking, safety, quality of water. Yes. And the boat counts that you have.
So is the study going to tell us that there's a shack on the harbor that wasn't there 2 years ago, that's now there, built with sticks and stones, and it shouldn't be there?
The comparative elements of it, I think staff will do that because the study does not capture something 2 years ago. It only captures what's there now. We have development orders that go over a period of time. So we can compare that information that they produce to what's been happening in the past. So we can make that comparative analysis on our own. But what they'll give us is the current state of the harbor right now. What uses are there, what counts, parking capacity, the quality of the water that we have, the pump, and a variety of other recommendations that they'll provide.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you. And the last thing I'll add, and I'll finish on, is the code. And I spoke with Ms. Corbin and Lance and Webb before she was hired and brought on. And, you know, that was, I think, before she was hired, right before she was hired. And I expressed that, as you said, or somebody said, you're about to step into the deep end, and you're going to be swimming hard what you're walking into. I mean, in so many words, I think I said something along those lines, that this is not, we're struggling right now when we hired her. We were struggling, we still are, and I think that's obvious. But what I would like, I'm not sure about you guys, but I would like to hear from Ms. Corbin, because I don't think we've heard from her yet in front of us. What is the direction of her department this coming year? I know that you can't come in and just change things overnight, and I don't expect anybody to, but I don't know if that's a council presentation or I can just go meet with her, but I feel like there's other council members that might be interested to hear all these things that we've been talking about tonight in the past 2 years. Where are we going with that? Where are we going with that? And I would love to have something like that in the early new year or something like that if y'all think that's acceptable.
I couldn't agree more, and in conversations with her, she intends on including many of those items in the report that's coming to the first meeting in November.
Okay, that's awesome. I appreciate that. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll talk about my deal next time, my last meeting on the 7th. I'm ready to go. So, land use attorney.
Nothing, thank you.
Nothing here.
All right, last time, public comment. Come on up. Me too. Name and address.
Bill Reddington, 722 Vintage Circle, Destin, Florida, 22-year resident. While y'all were talking about the situation down in Crystal Beach, I was texting back and forth with the owner of the property, and he's been thrown under the bus here. I had the impression, even from listening what happened here, that he never cooperated, he never did anything, okay? Well, guess what? He was here 90 days ago, and somebody agreed to the $7.6 million, or he gave them the $7.6 million appraisal that he had, and they couldn't make some sort of deal at that. He said he added some on there to cover some of his own expenses, okay? But then that was it. Well over a year ago, they told him they weren't interested in buying his house because they were looking at larger property. Okay, so there's a lot more to this story here, okay, than what's going on here. And especially when he was here 90 days ago, and it's not like he doesn't listen to the meetings. I mean, you should see the texts he was sending me while all this was going on, okay? And I just wish something would happen there, because you've had $8 million worth of money that you've thrown away to park golf carts. And I don't understand the rest of it and what's going to happen with that. You're going to sell those off? So that's what I have to say about that.
Bill.
Okay?
Thank you, Bill. And John?
Mr. Eddington, one of the points that I made was that he had an option contract. He made that very, very plain to me today. He had the option to stay in this, and he walked.
For $100, that was the option, okay? So that you understand that, the reason he walked was because he had a conversation, and somebody told him that, oh, okay, we're not going to look at your property right now, and that was almost a year and a half ago,
We're not going to have
So-
this negotiation here at the
Yeah.
dais at this time, especially
I mean,
coming
I know you don't
third-party
believe
bill.
me and what, believe him, but
No, I
I
think there's
got
a
it.
lot
right here.
more to the story.
There is a lot more to the story, and
Yeah.
you can talk to any one of these council members
I know.
individually, okay? So, but we're not going to have a discussion about contracts and negotiations that not everybody's party to.
Okay.
Including me. Thanks.
You out fishing again?
Yeah,
Cool. Hope you're catching something.
that was. Thank you, Bill. Go ahead.
All right, just real quick, John Stevens, again, in regards to the compass, during the middle of summer, when I emailed the 40 legal charters I found, I went ahead and did the process. And from when I submitted it to when it was closed, it took 1 month. And all I got was closed. So I don't know whatever happened to it. On another subject, there's, I don't know if you can see it, it's this sign that's on all the public, or on all the city properties. The very, pretty much saying if you're a passenger, the very last line says, each violator in your group is subject to a fine up to $500. So that's pretty much penalizing the tourists, not necessarily the business. So that's all I got. Or I'm sorry, through the help desk. Sorry.
Yeah, that's, John, that's, in what you're implying there is that we don't want to penalize the tourists for this. So I think that message is loud and clear from everybody up here, and I think our staff. So as we work through this process to get everything online, working with our code enforcement director, there are some solutions to this outside of maybe hiring Mike to issue $10,000 fines. But now, so we got that point.
I just want to make sure that sign gets changed.
I think they call it altering the sign. All right, come on up.
So I could drive home. It's hard to drive home with sunglasses on. 4 things, and I'm going to, for the record, I want to state that anytime I talk about a sign, I'm only talking about the right-of-way. In residential neighborhoods, I really have no focus on the commercial corridor. There's plenty of other people who can handle that. So with that being said, I was on the second short-term rental task force. Our minutes to our meeting have never been approved by the short-term rental task force. We came to this body in the previous council that was here at the time, and none of our recommendations were accepted by that council. So I move forward with a little bit more information. It appears to me, in my personal experience, that the problems that we have in residential neighborhoods south of 98 are trash, parking, and permitting of short-term rentals. Trash, parking, and registering short-term rentals. So I would also just want to throw it out there that if you're not a registered short-term rental, then I would say that I believe that you are committing tax fraud because you're not paying your taxes for bed tax. But my suggestion in all of that is, why don't we get a code compliance task force? We had a short-term rental task force, but let's get, with the new seat of the 2 new council members, let's work on getting a code compliance task force so you can have the citizens that do participate in the process bring it to a formal type of, other than my 3 minutes or 6 minutes that I get up here. The last thing I wanted to say is, before I came to the meeting here, I drove through my neighborhood of Holiday Isle, HOA section of Holiday Isle. There are 35 properties that have non-compliant signs. Maybe 5 of them are questionable, so that leaves 30 non-compliant signs in the right-of-way, for sale signs and short-term rental signs. And the last time I was up here and I was talking to you guys about waste management, I told you that we had a code that covered the additional problems that we had with waste management garbage cans. Well, in the short-term rental ordinance that we have on the books, we also have additional language for signs that specifically says your short-term rental sign cannot be in the right-of-way. I've had a lot of discussions, a lot of emails. I've really tried to get this corrected, and I don't know. The last thing I want to say is, to your comment about people coming to town and they shouldn't get, I go to lots of cities, and I can tell you the first thing I do is make sure that I'm not parking in a place where I'm going to get towed or ticketed. I look for that sign that says, bring up that app, pay your bill, and when you're at your restaurant, make sure it goes off 15 minutes before so you can add your 15 minutes and your 15 minutes and your 15 minutes. I think that's what I have to cover. I just want to say that almost everything that I ever talk about is in quality of life for all of us, not just me. And it's also for the quality of the tourists that come here and their experience. So shoot me or don't shoot me, but thank you.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to have more than 3 minutes. The HOA starts just past the pump,
At the
correct?
sign, yes,
All right.
correct.
What does the HOA do when it comes, do they have their own, don't they have their own set of policies and rules?
So if we're only speaking to these, their rules mirror the city of Destin's rules.
But there's no enforcement by the HOA on those rules, like there is in my son's neighborhood. If you park on the side of the road, which is against the rules, they write you a ticket and give you a fine. They don't, no warnings, no nothing.
There is
You
a
just
meet,
get 'em.
at the board meeting every month, there are letters that are sent out to the,
So there is
to the
a level
property.
of enforcement in that HOA?
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I want.
I would specifically say that that's really the only reason for an HOA, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering that you're having all these serious problems in an HOA when some of them ought to be dealt with by the HOA, or they just don't have that power, they just don't have that influence over their HOA members? Or, you know what I'm saying?
I'm not on the board. I
Okay.
only attend the board meetings like I attend these meetings. I can't speak for what, I just can't. I can't speak for staff. I can't. I can only tell you that it is my goal to make Destin a really great place for all of us.
Okay, I'm just bringing up the HOA issue.
Having run an HOA and living in an HOA, you know, it's $100 a day up to $1,000. If they got that sign out there for 10 days, boom, you hit them with that $1,000. And this is every time you come up here, the one thing I keep asking myself, and I'm glad you brought it up, was
Is what are they
the hell
doing?
is Holiday Isle Improvement Association doing about all these?
Okay.
Right, but we shouldn't
If
just
you're going to
fall
give me
onto
more
the HOA
time,
to
let me
enforce
just
our
make a
ordinances.
statement.
So,
No,
No,
you
no,
just-
that,
the city has
told
their
you.
own ordinances.
So let me answer this. So I stepped out of my HOA, and I found myself in Crystal Beach at the beginning of September. And I went out of my way one afternoon because I had some free time, and I documented, I don't know how many properties, A through I. You do that number. How many is that? I took the pictures, looked it up on the Okaloosa Power, a property appraiser. I screenshotted it. I looked up if they were doing business as a short-term rental because they had a short-term rental sign. The conversation that I had, that I discussed earlier, was based almost specifically off the fact that A, I shouldn't be telling you about it. B, I shouldn't be in Crystal Beach doing that because, I don't know, maybe that's not where I belong. And the other part of that conversation was that that person wanted to know why the comment was made to me is they would take it to their grave trying to understand why I would spend 5 hours of my time looking into something.
Well, that still doesn't,
No, but what I'm saying to you is, you're
discussion.
asking me about Holiday Isle, but Crystal Beach doesn't have an HOA.
Well, I understand that. That's why
All the rules apply to all the people
I-
equally all the
I
time, no
understand
matter
that.
if they're in an HOA or not.
I just brought it up.
I understand.
Because apparently you have way too much time on your hands.
I'm not sure, I know you're a little sarcastic.
Apparently, I know
but
how to
I
do the
appreciate-
job of
I
your code
appreciate what Ms.
compliance
Bell
department.
does. I know you're halfway
No,
joking, but
I'm
I do
joking with
appreciate
Marcy
it.
because I feel like I have the liberty to, because we are
Maybe you
friends.
do,
I
We
wish
are
they would
friends.
hire
I have
you.
to
I
tell you that
appreciate
if
it.
I'm doing the job
We
of your
do.
code compliance department, I should be being paid.
That's not what I was getting at. Let's go. Anyone else? Meeting adjourned.